Kasama batachinoy, besamay emetnor, semi kades mangustienta, fegadi besamay indionech, endihu bemedir tihun, yala janjarachnen sitenzare, bedelachnem ikkerbelen, igna yebedelnen ikkerendemenil, awada fetna matagban, kakifu adenenen fi, mengust yanta antanantana, highly maskam, Lisleana.
In the name of the African ancestors who began the march of humankind in the womb of Mother Africa, we ask these ancestors to be with us, to strengthen us, and give us a vision for the future. In the name of the African ancestors who began the march of humankind in the womb of Mother Africa and marched down the Nile, laying the foundations for human civilization and culture, we ask these Africans to be with us, to strengthen us, and give us a vision for the future. In the name of these African ancestors who built their pyramids and their temples to their God concepts, to their principles, and to their moral values, who left us a legacy of architecture and monumental building unparalleled in the history of the world, we ask these ancestors who built the pyramids, who built the temples, to be with us, to strengthen us, and give us a vision for the future. We ask these African ancestors who took this African culture and extended it throughout Africa, building the stone cities of Zimbabwe, building the empires of the Sudan, Ghana, Mali, and Songhai, building the Swahili city-states along the east coast of Africa, and in Christian Africa asking King Lalibela and giving him the courage to build the 12 churches of Lalibela from the ground down, monuments to the world. We ask these Africans who spread this culture to the Dogo and to the Akan and to the Yoruba and to the Bankongo and to the Zulu. We ask these Africans to be with us, to strengthen us, and give us a vision for the future. In the name of the Africans who opened up Africa, opened up the Nile Valley to other cultures and other peoples, and they came in and nurtured themselves on the African greatness. First coming in early with the ancient Hebrews, and they synthesized this culture and produced Judaism. Later coming in were the Christians, and they synthesized this culture and produced Christianity. Coming in were also the Greeks, who took the African culture, synthesized it, and produced Greek civilization. And then later, the Prophet Muhammad, and with the Arabs coming into the Nile Valley, they synthesized the culture and produced Islam. We ask these African ancestors, who as part of their legacy laid the foundations for Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and Greek civilization, to be with us, to strengthen us, and give us a vision for the future. We ask those African ancestors pulled out of Africa, taken to the hells of North America, South America, the Caribbean, maintaining the spirit of African humanity in their hearts and in their minds, and who left us this enormous legacy of struggle. We ask those Africans who resisted enslavement in the villages of Africa, who resisted enslavement in the shores of Africa, who resisted enslavement in those forts and dungeons, who resisted enslavement in the holes of those ships, who resisted enslavement when they arrived on these shores in the New World. We ask these Africans who ran into the highlands of northeast Brazil and established for 100 years the first free republic in the Americas, the Republic of Palmares, and their last great leader, Zumbi, who spared and sacrificed. We asked these Africans who replicated the Brazilian experience and went into the highlands of Jamaica and became the maroon-free communities. We asked these Africans who went into the backwoods of the Guyanas and Suriname and created free republic of the Suramaka and the Ajuka. We asked these Africans who went into the backwoods of Georgia and the swamps of Florida and moved with the Seminole Indians and resisted oppression. We asked these Africans who left us a legacy of struggle and resistance, the likes of which no one in the world has, to be with us, to strengthen us, and give us a vision for the future. We ask these Africans who created and laid for us a foundation of struggle and resistance that was passed on generation after generation, that was passed on to Harriet Tubman, who fought her way out of enslavement and became a symbol of freedom for all of us. Similarly, Frederick Douglass and hundreds of thousands of others fought their way out of enslavement. We asked those Africans who went with Boukman Dessalines to create the greatest revolutionary experience in the history of the world, the Haitian Revolution, leaving us a legacy, the likes of which no one else has had. We ask these Africans to be with us, to strengthen us, and give us a vision for the future.
8 minutes after 6 o'clock, a very, very pleasant morning to you. You're inside of the Africa Forum. It's Running Africa, and my name is Kabuma at Kheru. Thank you very much, Shane Clark, Wargood, Tell them what I want, howdy. We're going through until 10 o'clock. Talia is in this morning for Big A. She comes in at 10. My producer this morning is Joy Morgan. It's African Liberation Day today, May 25, 2014. On April 15, 1958, when the first Congress of Independent African States was convened by Osagyefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana, only 8 states on the continent were independent. They included Ghana, Sudan, Morocco, Ethiopia, Liberia, Libya, and Tunisia. African Liberation Day, of course, the first conference of Independent African States held in Accra, Ghana, attended by these 8 independent African states. It was the 15th of April and it was declared African Freedom Day. As those who gathered at the time said, or agreed to, it was to mark each year the onward progress of the liberation movement in Africa and to symbolize the determination of the people of Africa to free themselves from foreign domination and exploitation. African Liberation Day was conceived as a Pan-African and an anti-imperialist instrument. This morning, we're looking back as we go forward. No shame in going back to the past to retrieve that which we have lost. Go back and fetch it, they say, Sankofa, understanding that Sankofa is more than just going back. It is while we look back, taking from the past that which is the best of us, that which we have not fulfilled, the promises we've made to an entire nation, an entire race, that we've not fulfilled, the purpose which we have shunned in terms of those of us who are now. We are our ancestors, we know, but they have done what they could do or could have done with what they had. And those who met in 58 in Ghana set a blueprint, a timetable, in the vein of Mwalimu Marcus Messiah Garvey, a foundation of full freedom, of full liberation, of political and economic independence, a promise which has not been fulfilled. The role of the Africa Union in the unfulfilled promise must be discussed. How did the Organization of African Unity and then later on the Africa Union stymie the promise of full liberation, of full freedom? We must talk about that. We must talk about our own governments who, basking in the progress made by His Imperial Majesty the Emperor Haile Selassie in 1963 and before and onwards, and before him those who met at the Congress in 58, and still before them those like our own Chief Taichi, and Baba Sam Sharp and Baba Bogle, Paul Bogle, and the many others who fought in liberation struggles and understood what full freedom and liberation meant, but whose bodies, the vehicles which carried them, could no longer do so. How and to what extent have we betrayed that promise of full freedom? And how do we go back and fetch it? How do we Sankofa as a promise of African liberation been fulfilled? And when the African Union erases the word liberation from African Liberation Day, and many on the continent are today celebrating Africa Day, to what extent did they drive a nail in the coffin of Africa in terms of, and its diaspora, in terms of liberation and freedom from imperialism and what Asajifo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah called neo-colonialism, which he talks a lot about, and we have to go back and fetch that. We have to go back and fetch those principles, the foundation upon which African Liberation Day was built. So we know we're going to be talking about Africa Day today because many on the continent, some have not even realized that a word is missing from the title or the theme of the celebrations today. In South Africa, for example, they're very happy to celebrate Africa Day. And in Ethiopia, they're talking about Africa Day. In other parts of continental Africa and in the African diaspora, they're talking about Africa Day. We as Pan-Africans must ensure that we put liberation back in Africa Day, African Liberation Day, because the promise of liberation has not been fulfilled. So we're going to be talking about that today. And we are, and we know you've been listening to the promo, we intend to simulcast, and as usual, just a few glitches before we get there, but our intention is to simulcast this morning live to Ghana, to Accra, Ghana. My co-host is actually in Ghana, standing by at Gold 90.5 FM in Ghana with a group of erudite and well-qualified resource persons to talk about the issues that we're raising here this morning. So Prime Eye is standing by, and we are also standing by to make that simulcast to Ghana. So that Ghana will be broadcasting live to all of Jamaica, and to those who are tuned in on the internet at irefm.net, we'll be hearing and tapping in live into the discussion at Radio Gold 90.5 FM in Accra, Ghana. We're standing by for that as soon as we watch over Kings. At the same time, we are also joining into this conversation, and this is a historic attempt, may we just say, pretty historic. All right, if we could just get one of our technical persons to pick up from Ghana. If we could get a technical person to pick up from Ghana, because we can hear them calling in. All right. So that this is going to be a historic program if we can sort out the kinks, and we know that we will. Because while we talk and broadcast live to Ghana, to all of Ghana, and Ghana broadcast live to all of Jamaica and the African diaspora, we're also joining South Africa. So we're going live to South Africa for this broadcast. Ya Asantwa Archer Ndiji will be joining us live on the lines, tapping into the simulcast. Along with her, Fumzile Langa, who is a spokesperson for the Africa Day Committee in South Africa. So, Ya Asantwa Archer Ndiji is also the spokesperson. So we have a few persons who are spokespersons for the Africa Day Committee in South Africa. And this is the point I'm making, because here we have in South Africa the Africa Day Committee. The Africa Union has removed liberation from African Liberation Day, as they have removed organization from the Africa Union, and have changed unity to union. You know, that's an interesting concept. It changes the entire thing. What does that mean? What are they thinking? Alright, so Ya Asantwa Archer Ndiji and Fumzile Langa are in South Africa from the Africa Day Committee in South Africa. In Ethiopia, Dr. Desta Megu, Pan-African activist living and working in Ethiopia, and a liaison to the African Union for the Diaspora African Forum. And of course, underway in Ethiopia right now is the exhibition Rastafari, the Majesty and the Movement, of which Dr. Desta Megu is the chief coordinator and co-curator. She joins me on the phone lines. We expect that Dr. Julani Niaah will be with her in Ethiopia. So Dr. Jolian Niaah is expected also to be joining us live from Ethiopia. Sekou Kamara, our brother Sekou Kamara, was born in Congo-Brazzaville, grew up in the Ivory Coast, and studied in the African diaspora in the United States. He joins us this morning. He's now the Director of Operations of a World Bank matching grant in Congo-Brazzaville. And he joins us this morning also as part of this conversation as we talk about African unity and whether or not the promise of African Liberation Day or African Freedom Day has been fulfilled. Mutabaruka, our brother, Pan-Africanist, host of A Stepping Razor on the Cutting Edge, international renowned dub poet. He's now on the continent of Africa. He's been to Senegal, is in Gambia, and we also hope to join him this morning in the Gambia. Jolian Silvera, you heard him here last week in the studio. Member of Parliament for Western St. Mary. He's now in Lomé, Togo. He's in Lomé, Togo. Just completed an inter-parliamentary conference on the arms trade implementation, the arms trade treaty. This, of course, was adopted in April 2013 by the United Nations, signed by the United States last September. And of course, lots of questions, because we know that for the United States to become a party to the Arms Trade Treaty, it has to pass the 2/3 majority vote in the Senate. And for the treaty to enter force or to enforce, for it to be ratified, it has to be ratified, by 50 different countries, 50 ratifications globally for it to enter force. And so this is an interesting situation. So we want to hear the talk to our brother Jolian Silvera, who is in Lomé, Togo, about this, but also to look at the big questions of defense. An interesting conversation we must have defense important, even while we talk about African unity, defense and security. And a part of that is the UN's Arms Trade Treaty. Our conflicts being made more deadly on the continent of Africa. And how so? The treaty, of course, faces opposition in the United States and also from some African countries, and especially from groups that are worrying about the impact that this might have on gun owners and gun manufacturers in the United States. How can the treaty by itself affect the situation in Africa? Some of the questions that we want to look at. Even as we talk about African unity, we must talk about African defense and African security, especially against the background of what we see unfolding in Sudan, in the Central African Republic, in Nigeria, in Somalia. We must ask ourselves some questions about the extent to which Africa is able to face down those who manufacture and illegally trade in small arms on the continent of Africa, and those who would stand against an arms trade treaty that would seek to stem the proliferation of small arms across the continent of Africa. The conversation that we must have even while we talk about African Liberation Day, and especially when we talk about African unity. So Jolian Silvera at the Small Arms Conference in Lomé will be joining us this morning also on the phone lines. So we've got lots to talk about. We're still trying to work out the kinks here. We want to go live to Ghana. The conversation this morning, we hope, will be driven by my co-host in Ghana, Prime I. He's got his guests assembled in the studio in Ghana at Gold 90.5 FM. And our guests, of course, are scattered across the continent of Africa and in the African diaspora. We want to make those connections as soon as we possibly can to bring this conversation to you. It's a historic conversation. Nothing like this has ever been tried or done in radio in Jamaica. We hope that we are able to pull this off satisfactorily this morning. But we're working very, very hard behind the scenes and in front of the scenes to get this off the ground. Stick around, stay with us. You're inside of the Africa Forum, Running African. Just to let you know that we've got a new feature in the program, courtesy of Supreme Ventures, beginning today, of course, as you have probably heard. Supreme Ventures will be airing another draw, the dollars pick 2, pick 3 and pick 4 cashpot early bird draws, and those are coming up at 8:30. So we break for that at 8:30. A quick break. We'll be right back with much more inside of the program. 27 now after 6 o'clock. You're inside of the Africa Forum, Running African. All right, we're standing by to join with Gold Radio Gold 90.5 Ghana. Live simulcast this morning. Standing by in the studios in Ghana for this African Liberation Day simulcast are, of course, my co-host Prime I. Sorry, we do know you as Prime Z. It's been a long time. All right, Prime I. And his guests in the studio in Ghana include Grandfather Aitomeka, who's a Pan-Africanist, Chief Kwaku Ando, another Pan-Africanist, Nana Kofi, Explo editor of Kilombo magazine, and of course there'll be others there. At the same time, standing by across the continent of Africa, in South Africa, Ya Asantwa Archer Ndije, Fumzili Langa, standing by in South Africa. In Ethiopia, Dr. Desta Magoo, Dr. Julani Niaah. From Congo Brazzaville and the Ivory Coast, and in the African diaspora, Sekou Kamara, standing by. And from Gambia, Mutabaruka, We're making these connections. Also in Lomé, Togo, standing by is Member of Parliament for Western St. Mary, Jolian Silvera, just completed an inter-parliamentary conference on the Arms Trade Treaty. So once we get this together, and hopefully we can get this together, we will be making the rounds across the continent of Africa and the African diaspora. African Liberation Day, asking the questions about the promise of African liberation. Has a promise been fulfilled of the 1958 Congress of Independent African States? How do we mark the onward progress of the liberation movement in Africa and symbolize the determination of the people of Africa to free themselves from foreign domination and exploitation? This is especially relevant in this 21st century, and especially now as we see foreign domination in the form of Western domination, AFRICOM, across the continent of Africa. The militarization of the African waters, the militarization of Africa, the militarization of the Caribbean waters through the Caribbean Basin Security Initiative. And where do we and how do we view China against the background of a 1958 Congress? How, through what lens should we be looking at China in terms of our efforts, if they are ongoing, to free ourselves from foreign domination and exploitation? How do we do that as we celebrate African Liberation Day some 60-odd years after? The struggle to free Africa from foreign domination has a long and glorious history. Our brother Dr. Abdul tells us. From the very inception of European incursion into Africa in the 15th century to the current times, Africans from the four corners of Africa and all points in between resisted the enslavement of Africans and the slave trade, resisted colonialism, resisted neocolonialism and imperialism. And so as we celebrate Africa Liberation Day today, it's not just about the parties, it's not just about the cultural events, it's not just about the speeches. It's about who we are, how far we have come in freeing ourselves from foreign domination, from exploitation. It's about how we symbolize this, how we mark this, and whether or not we have achieved this. African Liberation Day means, for us, Pan-Africans, an anti-imperialist instrument to guide us in terms of how we respond to threats of foreign domination and exploitation. So we go back to go forward. We go back to remind ourselves. We go back to ensure that it does not happen again.
Running African, reuniting the African family for development.
Now 6:41. Now 28 degrees Celsius right here in Outaris. 6:44. All right, as we try to work our kinks out, let's go straight through to Ghana.
Resources were expended. Everybody show absolute commitment to see the back of colonial, occupying forces on our soil. It was fantastic. People did so much. I remember recently when I was coming from the Sudan, I chanced on an old general, and he was telling me how they will actually send horses to Angola, and how the Cubans train the horses to free Angola, and that decisive battle, Quito-Guana Valley. They actually succeeded by somehow training the horses to the extent that the horses, when they sense the enemy's scent, They know. I'm only saying this to illustrate the extent at which materials have been committed into the struggle to free the country.
So current generation, you think we've lived up to expectation to some extent?
Yes, to some extent. To some extent. It will not be appropriate to
say nothing
absolute condemnation. It doesn't really speak well. People sacrifice. But then, what has happened to the post-colonial leadership? That for me is the bane. Have they been able to really synthesize the road we were on before they came, the experiences we've had before they came, and future objectives? Certainly no. So, quote and unquote, these are born free, if I'm allowed to use the word, leadership. So they believe that if we consigned African destiny into the hands of the Europeans, we are somehow better off because it provided the kind of opportunity that we need in order to make the qualitative leap forward that we deserve as a people. So it's a yes and no. It's a yes and no. But I think that we have arrived at a situation where we need to look at ourselves and say, yes, we are probably betraying the cause of our forebears.
That's a strong one. Let me come to Chief on this one. Grandfather says we've gotten to a stage where we probably have to take a deep look at ourselves and say to ourselves that we are probably betraying the cause of our ancestors. Do you agree?
Yes, to a large extent I do agree. If we have to call a spade, we are living in extremely challenging times as a continent and as a people. And if you look at what is going on, it is so eerie. It looks like, the forefathers like Osajifo forecasted and prophesied these times if we didn't go according to what was prescribed. So you see other nations in, very successful economic blocks.
All right. We are tapping live and simulcasting from Ghana. Just lost them for a minute, and hopefully we'll be able to rejoin them in the discussion that is now underway from Radio Gold 90.5 FM. A historic occasion this morning for us here in Jamaica, for IRI FM, as we take this program live from Ghana this morning. My co-host,
TVs and radios in Ghana, were assembling our buses in Ghana, and now we import even matches and toothpicks. 50 years later, it's a great indictment on us as a people. It's time we had a wake-up call because, like I said, this was prophesied that if we didn't go according to what was prescribed, and they prescribed that we should unite, that we should come together, that we should put our resources, in one pot, like how you see in the EU now, where, you have countries working towards one interest. So yes, to a large extent, we've failed ourselves, and I think we are a critical generation because we are the bridge between the past and the future. The children of today, the speech you played by Nkrumah, nobody knows his voice. Most of them would not recognize their faces. So we are the last generation that can really defend this noble cause, to uplift our dignity and redeem the struggles of all the ancestors, because we have great ancestors. The greatest people who have walked the earth are our forefathers and mothers. who gave the world science and culture, music. So we must sit up. The issue of unity is a very, very important one, and it can come at no later time than now.
Absolutely. Let me come to the only lady amongst us here this morning, or the only woman, let me put it rightly, African queen amongst us here this morning. And grandfather talked about betraying the cause of our founding fathers, taking a long, deep look at ourselves and saying maybe we're betraying the cause of our grandfathers or forefathers. And Chief Kwekwando just talked about we not having a focused agenda. When you look all over the world, you know, it appears it's us Africans who do not seem to have a focused agenda and actually working at achieving that particular agenda. What do you say, Empress?
Good morning.
Good morning,
listeners and everybody. First, I think that there might be a lacuna somewhere. I think there might be an issue that we have not defined who we are in the first place. Yeah. What is an African? Who is an African? Even the name Africa, where is it from? If I don't know who I am, I can't decide where I want to go. I can't have an agenda. I can't have anything. So I think we have not answered the original question. And without answering that original question, all our sacrifices, everything we do, everything we're striving towards, I'm not sure you will be able to bear any fruit. Because, I mean, if you say you want to go for it on a journey, you don't know who you are, you don't know what road you are on, you don't know what journey you want to go for, you haven't defined your journey. Other people are defining who you are. Because even if we say African means a black person, it is other people that have defined that blackness as opposed to another other.
So how do we define the African?
Well, all of us have to answer that question. You see, that is part of the issues that we need to confront. What kind of questions do we as human beings first, living in this particular space, what kind of questions do we ask ourselves? What kind of questions do we need to ask ourselves? What ways do we interrogate these questions? Like I said, the first initial thing is, who is an African? Is it a black person? Is it somebody that lives on the continent of Africa? Is it whatever? Until we answer that question, I'm sorry, it almost looks like we cannot move forward from that point, because we have to know what we're supposed to be struggling for. Because now we have South Africans. Well, they're Africans too, or they close to the Africans too. Even the name Africa. I mean, you can't be John Bull and be fighting for any liberation. And so, it's true. And so, first of all, we have to define who we are. When we define who we are, then, well, I guess, then we'll be able to do whatever needs to be done. Because without that question, I'm sorry. Nani, you've been listening. Nani Explorer, you've been listening all this while quietly.
What do you think of what Yasantua just said? That we have to go on a journey of self-definition. I mean, before anything else can follow after.
The path of liberation is not about to start. It had already started. Amilcar Cabral said that for an independent Africa country to be truly independent, it must be a liberation movement in governments. He also talked about the cancer of betrayal. And so the issues of liberation are issues of real life in relationship among people and in combat with natural forces that we live around. Our land, our control of our land, our control of our resources. And actually, it is that relationship that spells out how we deal with everything around us. And when we want to discuss the issue of how far we've gone since the so-called independence, you see, at this particular point in time, it is very difficult to just refer to Africans as some homogeneous entity that just refer to Africans as some homogeneous entity that without distinguishing. Because we are in times when people who are on the boards of multinationals, which are taking our resources, people who run this country, manage them on behalf of the forces that divided and redivided the continent and its resources, are just like you and I. There's no difference between them and ourselves. That is a fact. They are not going to change. Europeans are not one day coming to replace people who are on the board of multinationals in our countries. Europeans are not one day coming to replace whoever is in, what do they call it? It's not Osukasa. What's the
Flagstaff House.
So we've got to a point where we have to say that reality has brought out a division between even Africans themselves in how we are going to contribute towards our future. And one thing which needs to be pointed out very clearly is that at this particular point in time, some of our own people have decided, because they have made a material choice to run the society on behalf of the forces that divided this country. They don't want to have a risk. And the fact is that once you do not want to take a risk and you just want to manage on behalf of other forces, and you benefit so much from it, and it gives you power over people, you are not going to come in at the same point in time, I volunteer to stop this control. No. Anybody who is thinking like that should be living in the skies. And also, we have to point out this fact that whilst some people have decided to be running the society on behalf of these external forces, while black people in South Africa have decided, people like Cyril Ramaphosa, who I respected very much some time ago, have decided to run apartheid state on behalf of white power and treat people, Marikana miners and others. There's no way in which, without struggling against them, you are going to push into the future. That is where we are. And that is why I salute Julius Malema and the economic freedom fighters.
Okay, so Nani, you said something very poignant, that reality has brought about a division. The reality of today has brought about a division between Africans and how to achieve what we want to achieve as Africans. Explain. Can you explain further?
Yes. I'll repeat some of the things I've said. One of the things I said was that the people who run multinational companies which go into gold mining, who go into oil drilling, and are companies which are extensions of companies from Europe and North America. We have our own, looking like you and myself, sitting on the border, taking resources from there, sharing this resource with their family, looking at their family, having power, making their family and others around them looking very powerful. People who run the state in the 54 African countries which are in the African Union, and places dominated by African populations in the Caribbean elsewhere, are all running this society on behalf of the external forces which divided and redivided Africa and have our resources under their control.
Great.
That is why even they cannot even protect us when they've won elections. That even when they've won elections and we have problems, we have to go and bring AFRICOM to come and do things. We have to go and bring the French military, and the excuse is always because we cannot do it ourselves. And how can these irresponsible elements be looked up to take society anywhere? And the point I wanted to make is that in each one of these countries, there are also organized forces. They may not have the resources at this particular point in time. They may rather reflect the positions of majority of the people in these various countries. When the French came into Mali, they went and arrested Omar Mariko. Omar Mariko I met in Tripoli at the last international conference before NATO invaded Libya. And they knew that people like Omar Mariko represented different interests than the other
Africans who look equally like them, but who run society on behalf of the French. And I think that these interests, which we will call class interests, are very important in the post-colonial period. You see, before we had our flag and anthems, it was very easy because everybody saw white people sitting on the governor's seat and all that. There are few people like Bougia who were district commissioners anyway. It's true, Africans were always part of those who took our resources and didn't care about majority of the people. But now, because the people who come to bribe us in the villages to vote for them, and who bribe and go and sign the economic partnership agreements, and who mislead our people when it comes to is it the plant breeders bill or whatever they call those kind of laws. All this while like us. So for me,
okay,
when you look at these conditions, the important is any day that I sit in public transport, I go to places where ordinary people are, I learn more than in any political meeting. The ordinary people know what is wrong.
Okay.
It is because the forces which make noise that they represent liberation themselves are not either well organized or are not focused or will not carry out the risks that predecessor generations have carried.
Interesting one there. That's Nani Kofi Explo, editor of Kilambo magazine, with us here in the studio. Very passionate about his views as far as African liberation is concerned. Let me say a good morning to our listeners in Jamaica. I've just been informed that we're live on IRA FM in Jamaica this morning. Well, it's afternoon here in Ghana, just 2 minutes past midday. But good morning to you, our listeners in Jamaica. Good morning to my sister, Andrea.
Good morning. Good morning to you, my brother. And thank you very much. Of course, you know that we have changed our name by deed poll. So it is now Kabu Ma'at Kheru. Thank you very much, Prime Eye in Ghana.
We also have Chief Andor. He is a Pan-Africanist. And you just heard Nani Kofi Explo, editor, Kilambo magazine. Now, let me come back to you, grandfather. What do you say about the argument that, I mean, before anything can happen, as far as our liberation is concerned, or before we can embark upon any sort of journey to liberate Africa, we first need to embark upon a road of a journey of self-definition, define ourselves. Who is the African? I mean, who are we as a people? I mean, is that not important?
Very important, but I think also that the African has been defined, and African will continue to be defined, because the space that the African need to occupy has been occupied by others. So somebody who is in that position will continue to pontificate and theorize our world for us. I think that, see, it was, I think it was Cabral who said that his hope is in the African, because the fact remains that so far as the African is poor, hungry, dejected, it serves as an opportunity to carry on the struggle. That for him, it is a source of inspiration for the struggle. So, for him, the African has been defined by his social, economic, and political condition. Until those questions are addressed, I said, a luta continua. We ain't gonna stop, because the objective realities that confront the African on a daily basis is sharply antithetical to the aspirations and the wishes of our forebears who struggle to win independence for us to walk with our shoulder high as free men and free women today. But the issue is that as our own conduct ever lived to redeem those principles that the forebears stood for, certainly we cannot be saying yes. If we did say so, it's again a slap and an insult to the very principles that those forebears stood on.
So you mean our conduct hasn't redeemed?
No, you see,
those principles.
Yeah, in no way we are trying to, in the little, effort to preserve those principles. Almost every now and then, our own attitude even among ourselves somehow betrays those principles. But we should not forget that there is actually a shared historical and cultural values. And those are the things that define the Africans. The collective self-reliance and self-sufficiency is another aspiration that defines the African. And above all, bringing the continent together under one political umbrella. And that political arrangement is what will assert African control over Africans' resources.
Have we not talked about this for years upon years, upon bringing the whole continent together under the same political umbrella? I mean, we've heard Nkrumah say this, we heard His Imperial Majesty Emperor Haile Selassie say this, we've heard all our founding fathers say this. And where are we now, grandfather?
Yeah, the fact that you are a Muslim, somebody is a Christian, Buddhist, traditionalist. The very thing that have been said before you were born as a Muslim or as a Christian is quoted in the Bible, in the Quran, and whichever. The very ritual that is performed in the shrine is continuing to be performed till today. But that doesn't mean that you get sick and tired.
But African liberation is not a ritual.
Okay.
African liberation is a struggle. It's a political struggle.
And it's a process. And it's actually a process.
Yes, I agree it's a process.
You see, the reason why you said it's a struggle is that, you see, you are having forces arrange against you, and you need to come head on and struggle it out with those forces. It is not different. You see, the physical battle to annex Africans' freedom from the hands of Western imperialists has been misconstrued when we now consider the issue of economic emancipation. You see, economic development in itself is also a struggle because, you see, you have forces that are opposed to one another. Unless you do away with those forces that stand on the way of the people, you cannot arrive at the kind of economic trajectory that you want to carve and see your people pursued. It won't happen. So I've arrived at a situation where we have all somehow decided to go to sleep and think that, yes, through our collective efforts, we are able to this classical colonialism. And we think that is the end of the struggle. Only wake up and realize that no, had already prophesied.
All right, we are getting just a disturbance in the simulcast to Ghana.
That call, that principle.
Hello, I'm here.
Okay.
All right, Sister Desta, hold the line for me. You are actually, Sister Dr. Desta Megu is in Ethiopia, and on the line from Ghana, there's a simulcast, of course, from Ghana right now. We are linked live into the continent of Africa as all of Ghana listens in to what's happening here. And joining us now on the lines from Ethiopia is Dr. Desta Megu. We're going to ask you to hold a line for me, Dr. Megu. How are you? Good morning, Hotep.
Oh, Hotep, sister, just feeling amazing, enthusiastic beyond belief after the opening we just had.
All right.
I justify the Majesty and the movement.
Thank you very much, Dr. Desta. Hold a line. The conversation, the discussion is already underway, in progress from the studios of Gold 90.5 FM in Ghana, where the host, of course, is Prime Eye.
Political weakness, and you can only redeem yourself from that weakness when you are able to weld together some microstates. Yes. We're powerless. The fact that 25 million people vote for you, it doesn't forget about it for nobody.
All right, Dr. Desta, we're hearing you. Just waiting on Ghana to acknowledge that we're here. And just hold the line for us,
No
Dr.
problem.
Desta. 1 minute, yes.
No problem.
That is greatly the life of the people of Nigeria. He can't deal with that. That brought to the question about the sanctity of the sovereignty of the Republic of Nigeria. Who is in control? Okay, that's a security aspect. Economic aspect is you can ask that question here in Ghana. Who is in control? All right? You have the constitution that established that, yes, all mineral resources embedded in the F-class of this country belongs to the people of Ghana. All right.
All right, as we seem to be having just a wee bit of technical difficulty with the feed coming in from Ghana, from Gold 90.5 FM. Hold the line for me, Dr. Desta. Let me just take a quick break and come right back.
Okay, no problem.
Now, 12 minutes after 7 o'clock. All right, we're back with you inside of the Africa Forum. It is Running African, a historic day today, May 25, African Liberation Day. Said earlier that the Africa Union has removed, for some unexplained reason, liberation from African Liberation Day. We still think and seriously hold that liberation, the liberation struggle must continue. Full freedom, full liberation has not been realized, not in situations where there is AFRICOM, the Caribbean Basin Security Initiative, Boko Haram, Al-Shabaab, Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb. And I'm saying this because a lot of these so-called terrorist groups are funded by and are driven by outside forces. We're going to Lomé shortly to talk about the arms trade treaty implementation discussions that are happening there in Lomé. But on the phone lines, we have our sister, Dr. Desta Megu, who is not only representing herself as a Pan-Africanist this morning, but also, as you know, underway in Ethiopia is the Majesty and the Movement exhibition. Dr. Megu, of course, is also an advisor on African diaspora issues to the Africa Union. My sister, Dr. Megu, all right, I think we just lost her. Can we get Dr. Megu back on the phone lines? Just lost her there. And in the meantime, on the way in Ghana, my co-host, Prime Eye, leading a discussion with his very special guests in the studio, including Grandfather Aitumika, who is a Pan-Africanist, Chief Kweku Ando, Pan-Africanist, Nana Nani Kofi, Explore, editor of Kilumba Magazine, and Niaah Asantua in the studio. Let's rejoin that discussion.
You, out of that murky situation, they've already moved ahead and redefined you.
Okay, define. Let's hold on there. I like the word define, and I'd like to come back to Yasantua's point of definition, and I'm glad grandfather ended on that word define. And Osajifo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah said, he talked about African identity and African personality. I mean, I'm sure if the definition of an African were not important, Osajifo would not have mentioned that. But Yasantua, should we not go beyond the definition? I mean, is it not too late to now be thinking, let's define Africa, let's define who an African is? And grandfather, you've been to a lot of countries on this continent. I'm not too sure if the African Union has defined who an African is in its charter.
Sorry, the amazing thing now is that Chinese on the continent are laying a legal claim to their ethnicity as Africans.
Oh,
so
really?
You go to South Africa now. Chinese by parliamentary, decision are classified as Africans.
Oh, really?
Yes.
And the law has been passed.
There's a law to that effect.
Okay, so let me come to Yasantua on this point.
So you see. There's no way forward. You have to know, this is such a fundamental, when a child is born, it is so fundamental. The child has to know who, that's the first thing. Who is this child? Of what parentage is this child? What are they now? You now even check DNA to check out the kind of diseases it is prone to and everything. If you do not know, and apart from the defining, he said it also, that by the time you get to a point, somebody else redefines the parameters, what you are chasing after. So you see, you have to know, I am so and so. This is my name. This is what I want. This is what I need. This is what defines who I am. You see, an Englishman is an Englishman. If you are born in England, in the UK, you can only become British. You can never become an Englishman. If you are born in France, of whatever nationality, you're only French if you're a Frenchman. Otherwise, you are of French nationality. An Italian is an Italian or a citizen of Italy. There's a difference. And that is why Americans, the only people that are white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. That is why they have issues called minorities. That is why you have African Americans, Asian Americans. You don't have white Americans in the classification. You see, the Chinese know exactly who they are. They have an ideology, Confucius. It is that defines who they are and drives them to where they are going to. The Chinese doesn't think China was created in 1948. The Chinese continually refer to their 5,000-year-old history. They continually remind themselves that, see, we used to be the richest country in the world. So an accident happened. They don't define themselves by that accident. China was conquered too. China was colonized. But they don't define themselves by that accident. They define themselves by their 5,000-year-old history. So you see, if we were defining ourselves as Africans by our 180,000-year-old history, then we won't have issues of, we will not spend 50 years talking about unity. It is because we do not define ourselves. That is why we spend 50 years talking about unity. Because the only issue with unity is that we just happened to be colonized barely 100 and something years ago. And the people that invaded our continent created prisoner of war camps. Now they have created this prisoner of war camps. Yes? When they were living, the prisoner of war in the prisoner of war camps, which we now call countries, now decided they no longer want the foreign wardens to supervise them. Now, after we now got out, we chased out the foreign wardens. You see, that's what we're doing. Instead of trying to get out of reversing the invasion, all we were fighting for was to get the white wardens out of our camps instead of the camps. But because we find ourselves, we do understand that what we should be fighting for is actually getting out of the camp.
So we simply occupy the structures that were left.
All we have in Africa are still prisoner of war camps. And of course, it will naturally be controlled by the people that set up those prisoner of war camps. So when we're complaining that this is not working, this is being controlled by, it is their prisoner of war camp. The only thing
it is their structure. They set it up.
The only thing that has changed is that the white wardens have been replaced by black wardens. So it's the analogy of Second World War. Can you imagine that the war is over and the people in the concentration camps stay in the concentration camps? And they start to define themselves from the time that they were put in that concentration camps. That they did not define themselves by what happened before they were put in the concentration camps.
Like Africans do define ourselves by slavery, by colonialism, almost as if our history started from slavery.
We now start to talk about, so every time anybody talks about Ghana, Nigeria, blah, 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 it is because we're defining ourselves by that, even when you're talking about slavery, we're defining ourselves by that 400-year-old history. The human race started in Africa, where at least everybody in the world is actually an African. That's why I said we need to define who an African is. Everybody in the world is an African. The first human was here. They are the African diaspora. So that is why the Chinese man, he will legally claim it.
That he's African.
Oh, he is African. He is
not you agree? The Chinese man in South Africa.
He's just been away for 70,000 years.
Sometimes I get surprised when America comes into the question, because Amerindians will find that anybody is American other than them, because there's a rich, proud history of Amerindians, and the fact is that reality has made those debates be seen as Americans. And that's why I stress so much on reality. There is so much of the reality on this continent that nobody is going to be able to reverse. Human beings are not like computer software, that what you wish is what you get at the end. Human beings, once human relations have been built, we wish very much. I do not see how anybody is going to push Arabs, who maybe came here only 7 years before Christ or something like that, yes, or other races who live among us today of this continent.
Running African, reuniting the African family for development.
No. These are all reality. And when we want to build into the future, it is with the real world that we are going to plan into the future. It's not our wishes. It's always said, if wishes were horses, it's right. And the fact is that's why I don't build on the basis of wishes. Yes, I wish that affordable housing will be all over the place. I wish that when I wake up tomorrow, access to free public transport will be very perfect. I wish that when I wake up tomorrow, I'll not be fearing that when I'm traveling from Peking at 3 a.m., armed robbery will be somewhere around Sinche before I get to Accra.
My brother Prime, I just want to interrupt a bit. Pardon me. Are you hearing me?
When you were playing Nkrumah's speeches, he was talking about you to be able to know what you can do. You have to assess the strength of the
enemy. Yes.
And the fact is that I can wish anything, but to be able to know how I can move to the other stage, I will have to assess reality.
But is it not good to also know where you are actually coming from? I mean, to have a clear understanding, even if you can't change the structures. So, I mean, at least you should have a clear understanding.
We have a clear understanding of the fact that Africans have not always been like this. We have a clear understanding of the fact that there was a time that what is called the Sahel and the Sahara today were places from which grains was exported to feed all these Europeans and others. That's true. Nobody's going to wipe that off. But again, how do we move from where we stand today? Because we can only move from where we stand today. We could wish that we're standing somewhere else, but we are not going to be able to move from where we wish we were standing. We can only move from where we are standing today.
Okay. Let me, thanks, Nani. I'll come back to Chief Kwekwando, who is also with us here in the studio. We are live on Radio Gold, 90.5 FM here in Accra, Ghana. And you can also get us on our Android mobile app. If you're on Android, you can listen to us live and also online on our website, myradiogoldlive.com. But let me do a check on my sister Andrea. If Andrea, if you can hear us,
I'm hearing you loud and clear, my brother, and we have been tuning in and tapping into the discussion since probably an hour. We have carried an hour and a half of the conversation so far. I think for as long as you've been on, we've had most of the conversation being carried live on IRE FM on the 107s. Let me welcome our listeners on the 107s. Also, welcome to our listeners on IREFM.net on your BlackBerry and your mobile apps. This is a global program. It is being aired and heard all across the world, wherever the African diaspora and then some. So we do hope that you are tuning in. Very, very, very instructive conversation, discussion happening there in the studios at Gold 90.5 in Ghana. We are joining now, and we just lost her actually. Dr. Desta Megu is in Ethiopia. She's joining us by phone lines. Dr. Megu, of course, is an attorney at law, a Pan-African activist living and working in Ethiopia, and she also serves as liaison to the Africa Union for the Diaspora Africa Forum. She is also the chief coordinator and co-curator of Rastafari, the Majesty and the Movement exhibition that is now underway in Ethiopia. With her is Dr. Julani Niaah. Dr. Niaah, of course, is the lecturer at the University of the West Indies. He's there as part of a colloquium happening in Ethiopia. Later on, we go to the Ivory Coast, Congo-Brazzaville, to speak with our brother Sekou Kamara. Sekou, of course, was born in Congo-Brazzaville, grew up in the Ivory Coast, and lives between the United States and the Ivory Coast. He is now director of operations of a World Bank matching grant in Congo-Brazzaville. He'll join us on the phone lines. Our brother Mutabaruka, Pan-Africanist activist, as you know, Rastafarian, host of the Stepping Razor and the Cutting Edge here on IRE FM, internationally renowned dub poet, will also be joining us live from the Gambia. Muta, of course, at the Roots Festival in the Gambia. And our own Member of Parliament for Western St. Mary, Jolian Silvera, he is now in Lomé, Togo, has just completed an interparliamentary conference. The subject matter, of course, the Arms Trade Treaty implementation. When we talk about Africa Union, we have to talk about African defense and security. And it's one of those issues that we want to look at. We're standing by Prime Eye to rejoin Dr. Desta Megu and Dr. Julani Niaah, who are in Ethiopia. We're also going to be going live to South Africa. We are members of the Africa Day Committee, and many people are saying the Africa Union, as you know, have eliminated the day, erased the day liberation from African Liberation Day. That, of course, is telling, and but we're joining the spokespersons for the Africa Day Committee in South Africa. Our sister Niaah Asantua, and I know you have in the studio with you also Niaah Asantua right now. So Niaah Asantua Njidi will be joining us from South Africa, along with Niaah Asantua from South Africa. Another spokesperson joining us on the phone line, Mrs. Langa from Zuli Langa, will be joining us from South Africa. In the meantime, we go to Ethiopia, where our brother Dr. Julani Niaah and our sister Dr. Desta Megu are live. Dr. Niaah, I can hear you. Dr. Megu, Welcome back. We keep losing you. We're broadcasting live to we're broadcasting live to Ghana, Dr. Megu. As we told you before, I know Dr. Julani Niaah is with you, and both of you, of course, coming from
right next to me on my right,
and both of you coming from Ethiopia. So this is a historic day for us all around. Before we get to the conversation on African unity and Africa, the unity of Africa and the African diaspora, let us talk quickly about an important event that was launched last night in Ethiopia that is part of the Africa unity that we're talking about. That is a Majesty and the movement.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And it was launched this morning, actually. It was launched approximately 6 hours ago, and certainly it's a testament to the narrative of Pan-Africanism. In our presence, we had Ambassador Norma Taylor representing Jamaica. We had Ambassador Albert Yankee from Ghana. We had brothers and sisters from all over the African diaspora who came to pay homage to the Majesty and to the movement. And we're talking about elders from in their 90s down to little babies 9 months old. So on this African Liberation Day, May 25th, history was made and continues to be made, because again, we've got youth. Denisha is sitting here. We all know Denisha as an activist. So we're just very, very elated, excited, and I'm happy to share this with Jamaica listeners.
Dr. Bego, let me just make the rounds and say hello to the folks who are sitting with you right there. Then we come back to talk a little bit about even your own role at the Africa Union and what does African Liberation Day mean against the background of 1958, against the background of 1963. Has a promise been realized? Has a promise being fulfilled? Are we sitting on our laurels? What's our purpose in all of this? I know you have Dr. Julani Niaah. So, Dr. Niaah, greetings, my brother.
Yes, Dr. Niaah.
Yes, Dr. Julani Niaah, live
Hello.
from Ethiopia. Dr. Julani Niaah, I know you're part of... Greetings, Julani.
Greetings, Kabu and the running African family, African Forum family.
Okay, great. And say greetings to the folks in Ghana. They're hearing you live. We're broadcasting live on Gold 90.5 in Ghana.
Greetings to my brothers and sisters in the West. On the continent now, it's like I'm speechless, Sister Kabu. I didn't expect to be here, and being here is really in divine order. It's just a different experience. 2 days ago we had a Niaah, which was the first time I was participating in a Niaah in Ethiopia, and to sing the songs that we have created in Babylon, in Zion, is just a completely different experience, you know. The range of diaspora and continental Africans who have come in just gives you a good understanding of the tremendous magnetism that His Majesty has garnered around him. For days in front of the National Museum, the Rastafari community has more or less taken charge in a space which is a national space, Sister Andrea. And the Ethiopians have stood back to allow us to help them to honor their Majesty. It's a wonderful combination of purpose and history that has converged. I stood inches away from the purple robe His Majesty wore on his coronation day. I actually was there as it was being prepared to go under the glass. And I thought to myself, this is one of the most photographed vestments in history, and here it is, I'm in breathing distance from it. So in a sense, just to be able to visually engage with something that has meant so much to all of us, the images in terms of pictures presented by Ethiopians from the 40s that really represent His Majesty in crystal terms as a true divine African spirit are part of this exhibition. So the curators have
And one of the things that you have said,
Go ahead.
one of the things that you have said, Jolani, is the extent to which Africans from the diaspora and continental Africans are gathered there in Ethiopia for this event and on this day, which we are observing as part of the African Liberation Day activities. Let us talk quickly, Jolani, before you pass on to Danisha Prendergast, who I know is also with you. Or we just lost them. We just lost them, Primai. They're in Ethiopia. The connection is what it is. One of the things that we want to talk about is the colloquium, the conference, and the seminars that are also underway discussing African unity as part of the Majesty and the Movement exhibition. Danisha Prendergast, of course, who is there, who we are going to be trying to get back on the phone lines, is a granddaughter of Bob Marley and Rita Marley, and she's down there in Ethiopia documenting all of this, being part of the ongoing activities. As we wait to rejoin them on the phone lines, Primile, I throw it back to you to continue the conversation. Very, very interesting conversation. I hear Chinuezo talks about that before we can move ahead, and I heard Niaah Asantewaa in your studio saying a very similar thing, that before we can move ahead, there is a need to ask ourselves basic questions. Who am I? Where am I from? Where am I going? How am I going to get there? Once I get there, what? So I think really and truly, as we observe African Liberation Day, that the question of self-definition is very, very important. We just had the Pan-African conference here in Jamaica at the University of the West Indies, in which Nigeria led this time around. And one of the questions that was raised but never got answered was, who is an African? Because there is confusion, and depending on who is funding what, persons are not necessarily willing to answer the question of who is an African. But I do agree with Niaah Asantewaa that we have to ask ourselves that question, and we have to answer it to determine how we move ahead. Primai, as I talk, we're rejoining Ethiopia. Who do we have? Is this Dr. Julani Niaah or Danisha?
Yes, Mr. Kabo. This is Jolani.
All right, Jolani.
Danisha's right here. Her fingers are well employed with the Ethiopian in Jara, though, but she can take the phone in a few.
All right.
You want to talk to Danisha?
I want to ask you a question, Jolani, about the colloquium that's coming up. Which you are instrumental in organizing, and some of the issues regarding African unity that will be discussed there. Are you there, Jolani? Did we lose you again?
Maybe now, please.
All right, there you go. Problem connecting properly with Ethiopia. I'm throwing it back to you, Primai. When we get back, we'll be talking to South Africa. Go ahead.
Great, Andrea, and that was my sister Andrea in Jamaica on IRA FM, and let's get back to our discussion. And I was coming to you, Chief. You've heard, we've said a lot of things on this discussion. What do you think? And Andrea mentioned African Union like 5 times or so. What do you think of the African Union in all this? Like she said, now it's Africa Day. It's not African Liberation Day. I mean, how the organization of African unity that our founding fathers got together to put together. What has come of it? I mean, how influential is the African Union today?
Well, I think the African Union has lost a lot of the purpose for which it was set up by those original founding fathers, and so the early works that were done to sort of get us on our feet have really been abandoned in earnest. You know, you have almost a bureaucracy which supports a few hundred people, or how many employees there are in the African Union, who attend meetings and write reports every year and travel to countries and are given per diems and stay in hotels and get conference bags with different cities printed on them. This is the sort of work that the African Union is doing right now. But the African Union, if it had teeth, would not have betrayed a leader like Gaddafi the way he went down, without even voicing the need for us to respect the sovereignty and the positioning of Africans. There was no single voice across the whole continent. This is a huge indictment. I think another indictment on it, and not to be negative, but to be realistic, like we're all saying, we need to be realistic. To even take off the tag of African Liberation Day wants to assume that we have arrived, that we are liberated, that we are free. But the task is so huge ahead. And so it must cease to be less of a bureaucracy, like the UN is in many ways, and more of an effective organization that helps us dial up our collective identity, as one people, and our collective purpose to take our people to a better earth. So you look at a mineral like coltan, which is so critical to the whole digital age and is mined in the Congo, and you look at the fact that if these resources were managed well, you could only procure them from one entity, and then at one price. And you look at the impact that mineral, which is needed for every single digital chip in the world, would bring to Africa, the sort of revenue. So that unity, which will bring the economic freedom, is supposed to be the work of the African Union, and we don't see that being brought to bear. African countries across are still importing everything, and we don't trade amongst ourselves. There are surpluses in some countries, and there's salt in one country, there's no salt in another country, there's cocoa in one country, there's no chocolate in another country.
And there's no coordination?
There is no coordination. So, like I said, it's more of a bureaucracy. We attend lots of meetings in Africa, committees, reports, conferences, and, the bureaucracy of... But it's all a game that allows, the plunder to go on.
I guess it's a good buyer of time.
Yes, in that sense. 50 years later, 50 years later, you look at, the African Union, and that alone should say, what it is. It needs to step up and stand for the real economic freedom. It's only through the economic freedom, as we see in the EU, through their unity, that their citizens benefit from. And Africans have the resources. We have everything going for us: sunshine, rainfall, black soil, and mineral wealth. And an organization like the AU must be the coordinator of putting together these fractured elements to serve the common purpose of living our destiny as blessed people.
Absolutely. And indeed, we are blessed people. Maybe we don't recognize that ourselves. Nani, yes. What do you think of the African Union?
Look at reality again. It's a problem in South Sudan, Uganda, a country which refers to itself as the chair of the Global Pan-African Movement, intervenes on the side of one of the forces. Problem in DRC, Uganda intervenes in Eastern DRC on the side of various forces. Uganda and Rwanda engage in destabilizing activities in the DRC. DRC refugees being returned from Angola and Brazzaville. It's a problem in Central African Republic. Chad is spread into Chad. It's spread into other parts of the continent. Again, that's the reality. In fact, I'm not very much worried about labels, because that's not my starting point. African Liberation Day has been called in Zambia since time immemorial, even at the Kaunda as Africa Day. Whilst Kaunda was one of the people who supported Nkrumah strongly when he was in gaining Conakry. So labels are not my worry, really. That's why I always give examples of what is happening physically. That's my starting point. That is what is happening in our lives. How are we going to stop that?
But the extent to which, can I just say,
Andrea wants to say something.
Yes. The extent to which, and I don't understand what my brother Danny Kofi is saying about labels. And the question then is the extent to which we diagnose our problems is the extent to which, or our situation, our progress, is the extent to which we're going to be labeling them. So where are we in the progress against neocolonialism, in the struggle against imperialism, especially against the background of China? How do we then, what role do labels play in determining where we think we are psychologically in the struggle to full freedom, to liberation?
In fact, label and definition are not the same things.
Not at all.
In fact, I'm one of the people who had followed Cabral's speeches very, very carefully. One of the things Cabral does is that he uses categories which have been used in various aspects of analysis. But Cabral makes sure that he communicates with their population. And so sometimes we can be hung up on labels. That's why I gave an example, for example, of the Kaunda days. With Kaunda, Nkrumah, and Nyerere were quite close. And the fact that Kaunda called Africa Day in Zambia, didn't make it less important than the African Liberation Day in Ghana at that particular point in time. And that's why I also pointed out that this Kaunda, who was calling it Africa Day, was one of the people who gave physical support for Nkrumah to survive in Guinea. So articulating a point, defining and labels are different things.
So
label is like a brand and can be destructive. Can be a distraction. And you can have people using the same label but defining them differently.
True.
And when people define the same label differently, it brings about chaos because they'll think that they are fighting for the same thing, but they're talking at cross purposes. And that's why I brought in the issue of definition. And definition and label are two different things.
Okay. All right, let me bring in Grandfather Aitomeka. Grandfather, you've been listening a lot. I've been asking a question about the African Union, and I'm wondering, I mean, today, such a big day in our history. I mean, everything started here in Accra in 1958, moved to Ethiopia 63. But African Union, Grandfather, you are a well-traveled Pan-Africanist. You've been to almost every country on this continent. What do you think of the African Union?
That is what we have, you know. That is what we have. Well, you can continue to criticize African Union, but what do you have as an alternative? You see, some of us have run into some challenges, so to speak, with some of the chaps at the union. I think that was a month and a half ago. I mean, we were at a COSOC meeting, and I said, oh, okay, those of you who think that the Security Council should be biting, should come forward. You kept talking at the fringes and You know, the more you talk, you become an enemy. So frustration sets in. Then you ask, what direction do we have? Okay. If you go to the AU headquarters today, you sit down closely with people who are in the realm of affairs. You want to chart them through progress of work. You end up inflicting hypertension on yourself. Then you ask who brought who to do what. Okay. There was EU summit that was in early March with other African head of states. EU refused to give Mugabe's wife visa. There was a protest. Jacob Zuma decided not to go as a way of solidarity. Security Council of the African Union issued a statement condemning it point blank.
Condemning which one?
The actions of European
Union. Okay.
Then there was a meeting which was cobbled together by somebody. So the commission chair was asked to send a strong weather statement on behalf of the continent that they will not accept pick and choose policies as they have done during the colonial era. They accept Mugabe and the wife, or they forget about everybody going. Then some people from West Africa here, I don't want to mention them.
I hope it's not Ghana.
Oh, well, I don't know. Quickly, they were the first people who landed in Brussels
for the meeting.
Then the rest of the leadership in the continent say, what are they going to do? Hey, then what about us? Probably there is some small cake on the table. So that position, collective position, have been sabotaged by our own people.
So some people from West Africa, after the statement from the African Union that they won't go because Mugabe's wife was denied a visa.
Yeah.
Some people from West Africa went there for the meeting.
Yeah. But the issue that the Security Council brought up, which was discussed, was that, look, it's not about the wife of Robert Mugabe. They are not doing that because he married a woman. They are doing that because of the principles that the man stood for. So if you don't do anything to show your dislike for the action, it might happen to you also. This was explanation given by the Security Council. Of course, that statement came directly from ECOSOC, of which some of us are members. But what again? The divide and rule. People have decided that, look, it is better to align with the oppressor. Okay. Just, excuse me, let me digress a bit. Just a few months ago, I think if I'm right, it should be about a month, when there were 3 weeks getting to 4 weeks, when the Minister of Trade and Industry and his counterpart at the Foreign Ministry and Regional Integration organized a press conference to talk about the EPA. Now, in the conclusion remark of the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Integration was that this was off the script, that if you look at the behavior of certain sister countries in West Africa, where they have prescribed their own rules and regulations with respect to goods and services, trading, and then you see the offer by Europe to us, then he asks a rhetorical question. Do you think that Ghana can industrialize as a result of the kind of policy impediment being put on the way by other sister countries than Europeans who are giving you almost, access free, but 100% as they claim, to their economies? Quickly, what struck a deep chord in me was that, yes, we have come back to the days of Lubengula, where those colonial treaties were signed at the blind side of our kings, queens, or our elders those days, because yes, they do not understand the spirit and the letter of those treaties that they have appended their sig. Even whether they can even read and practically reflect.
May I ask a question then, Grandfather? Yes, against this background and the context of the betrayal and the divide and rule and traitors among us that I hear you referring to, and which so many of our Pan-African scholars and elders have pointed to as that which continues to stymie African unity. What then would African unity look like? And when we say African unity, what are we talking about? Is this possible?
Yes. If you try and get the statement issued by the AU chairman, the president of Mauritania, and then you juxtapose that statement with the one issued by the commission chairperson, Dr. Nko Sazana, you will see the deep sense of confusion and frustration. Now, Nko Sazana is saying that the roadmap to unity or union among the people of Africa should crystallize somewhere around 2063. Then we are looking at 50 years from now, because it has taken us 50 years to be where we are. Okay, then they say that before we get to that, there are certain activities that are on the road that we need to complete. All right, the regionalizations and all those things must be done. But they believe again that the position of Houphouët Boigny and others, gradual incrementalism, is what will lead us to, quote and unquote, the promised land. So the gradualists somehow have taken a hold on the structures of African Union. And I know that coming next year thereabout is going to be a revolution within the headquarters of the African Union.
Okay, but grandfather, that's like the approach, gradualism and all of that. But I think what Andrea is asking is, how will an Africa united look like? I mean, when we say African unity,
well, it's very simple.
What kind of a continent will Africa be if we are united? How will it look? What will the structures look like?
Inclusive of the African diaspora.
Right.
The African is already united. There's no way. There's no way. You see, if you ever attempt to foray between the colonial borders, you come to terms with that deep feeling, sense of belongingness. That is, you see somebody at the other side of the border, and then you look at yourself, and then you see no difference.
And yet it's difficult for us to go through the borders. You are manhandled if you are, I mean, even Ghana-Togo border. I mean, Ghanaians, I've never been, I don't even want to be there because the stories I hear coming from the border. I don't even want to go there to be treated like I'm not an African.
Yeah, but that is a more reason why we are all craving and struggling for a total political unity. You see, it is that will cure this fear, which is true anyway, because I've gone, I mean, severally, and it continue to be like that. You understand me? But then, you see, if you don't have all these challenges, we will not have any struggle. Because we have to struggle to overcome those challenges. So they are there. But it is not just one day thing. This has been part and parcel of us as a result of foreign colonial occupation that we have suffered. Of course, you cannot rule out the slavery and the scar that we bear, and we continue to carry it through into our future, which is reflecting our children. So, yes, we have a combustible mix of experiences throughout our journey in life today. So, it will be inappropriate to say that because of these hurdles, you see no bright future. Because yes, you will be manhandled at the Lome border or Ghana border or Lubo border. So forget it, simply because yes, the Ivorian gendarmeries will manhandle me because I am a Ghanaian. Well, if you do that, it's defeatist stand. Alright? Yes, they were put there deliberately. It's a colonial structure. We have to deal with that structure. And that
we also have to. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think, and on the other hand, I'm speaking on behalf of Africans in the diaspora now. We have, for example, our brother Mutabaruka, who is in the Gambia, just moving from Senegal. Literally, and it's a terrible term to use, but almost begging the government to remove the visa restrictions from Africans in the diaspora who wish to travel to Africa, who wish to return in whatever way. Whether if I want to come to Ghana tomorrow, I have to get a visa. I did not ask to be here as part of the enslavement of Africans. Many of us are in this part of the world. But to get back to Africa, which we consider our motherland, we go through the borders ourselves, and we do have to get visas. Now, we hear in the Gambia, they're saying today that they're considering lifting the restrictions, waiving visas for Africans in the diaspora. In Ghana, we have been discussing that with the Ghanaian government since I have been part of that conversation since 1992 at the first Panafest. And we haven't seen a change. The government of Ghana, in fact, has made the Prime Minister of Jamaica an honorary citizen of Ghana, which is a slap in the face to many Pan-Africans, many Jamaicans, who know that our governments don't give two hoots about continental Africa or about Pan-Africanism, but this is what governments do. They operate government to government. And so we still have the struggle that we're dealing with in terms of even the right to return when we talk about African unity and reuniting the African family for development.
Right, Andrea. Yes, Antoine will come in here now.
Yeah, Andrea, hey.
Hey, good morning.
Now, I think we have to go back to the original question. It looks like I'm repeating myself, but like you said, if we do not answer the original question, then we keep encountering all these problems that sap our energy and take away our energies.
Of course.
If we do not answer the original question, who is an African? Mm-hmm. Because if that question is answered, then there won't be any need for Ghana requesting a visa from Africans in the diaspora, because there is one Africa, so won't be any need for a visa.
Exactly.
A lot of the things that we think are problems are only problems because we have refused to answer that question. And I suspect that we have refused to answer that question because we are afraid to answer that question. Mm-hmm. Now, the very picture of the Africa that has been painted, at least in the past 300 years, is a horrible picture. The barbarian, the simpleton, the poor person, the oppressed, the slave, and everything. So I think a lot of us are scared of what we will find if we need to discover, if we need an answer to that question. Well, that is because we really don't know. That is why we are so afraid.
Yes.
For instance, even the simple question of this African unity, how is it approved, how is it going to look like, how is it going to be achieved? First of all, we have not even answered the question of what is the purpose of this unity. Mm-hmm. Is it to make money? Is it to defend ourselves? What is the purpose? We haven't said what the purpose is. We just said, we want to unite. Who and who? Like fella, the famous artist said. He says, who and who unite for inside United Nations? Who and who should unite inside this Africa that you're talking about? There are fundamental. If you don't understand, if you're sick and you go to a doctor, if you do not answer the fundamental questions. You can't say, oh, just give me drugs. Let me just continue to take drugs. He doesn't know what's wrong with you. And that's why if you are just taking drugs and you think it is progress, then you will continue the illness. The illness, if I give you paracetamol, which will reduce the fever, but the fundamental illness still will not be solved. So we can't just keep moving forward without answering the question. Now, sorry, the gradualist approach that I was talking about. The only reason we have all those confusions is because we have not answered the original question, who is the African? Because if we have answered the original question, we might discover things that surprise us. The only reason there is a major problem about this African unity is because we are thinking in a Euclidean world. We're using Euclidean geometry. So everything is hierarchical. There's a hierarchy. This one leads to the next step, leads to the next step, leads to the next step. Well, in the world that we live in now, everybody says Google it. The only reason Google was able to beat everybody at the game is because they left the Euclidean geometry and they got their whatever to think in fractal geometry. This was only discovered in 1976. But guess what? It is the fundamental basis of all African thought systems. So we're actually fundamentally different. And because we're fundamentally different, we have to find fundamentally different solutions. I didn't say fundamentally African solutions, because now Africa, like he said, label. Africa has now become a label, not a definition. We mean... no, I didn't say you said that. You said labels and definitions
are different. So yes.
If we mean if we mean that black people, let's say black people, let's say we're fighting for the black cause. Let's stop using labels that are not appropriate. So if we have refused to define Africa and we insist on using black, the color of the skin, then let us use the color of the skin. You said we're dealing with the reality. Now, in North Africa, the Arabs, they don't have to have the same wants as we do, and they don't have the same rights. Yes. So the reality of the situation, the only reality of the situation is actually we are sick. That is the only reality. Africa is sick. Every other thing is an aside. Africa needs to be healed.
So that there is a diagnosis, and now what is to be prescribed is where you're saying the conversation must the jump off point now is. We've diagnosed our condition. We're ill. We're sick. We're unhealthy. Now the continent and the diaspora needs to be healed. How do we do that? I know that your conversation is going to continue in the studio. I have to take a quick break on this side, and then I'll rejoin the conversation back with Gold 90.5 right after my break.
Great, Andrea. Let me come to you, Chief.
12 minutes now after 8 o'clock here inside of the Africa Forum, running African, and a very, very special morning on this African Liberation Day as we simulcast live with Ghana, Radio Gold 90.5 Ghana, and the discussion currently underway. Have Africans lived up to the legacy of African liberation? How far have we come on the long road to liberation, and in which direction are we heading? Prime Eye is my co-host. He's at Radio Gold 90.5 in Ghana. His guests in the studio include Grandfather Aitumeka, Pan-Africanist, Chief Kweku Ando, another Pan-Africanist, Nani Kofi Explo, editor of Kilombo Magazine, and Niaah Asantewaa. We are going to be rejoining that conversation. We're standing by to speak with Jolian Silvera, who is in Lome, Togo. And it seems we're having some serious telephone lines issues. Mutabaruka is standing by in the Gambia. Sekou Kamara standing by also to talk to us, representing Congo Brazzaville and the Ivory Coast. We're communicating with these people, but for some reason or the other, either way, we're communicating by email and so on. But either way, from both ends, we're having difficulty getting the telephone calls into Jamaica. So we're standing by for all of that, though. In the meantime, we return to the conversation that's underway in Ghana. Prime Eye, of course, my co-host this morning.
Coming to deliver emancipation. There's no president that is coming to this country to rule and deliver this people if in their campaign message they're not speaking about the looking at the mining contracts which ensure that the majority of money is taken out. If in Zimbabwe the same mining companies can by the law own 49% of the mine resources and the government owns 51%, it should be applicable in Ghana. These are the tough decisions that we must hold our people responsible for. So in the context of Ghana and every country, there's so much talk and this party and that party and this side and that side. There must be one agenda. We must develop for one common purpose. And so I'll say it again, there's nobody coming to save Ghana or Africa unless we restructure the way we are structured currently to be a subservient economy, to export raw materials and to continue in the way the colonial masters wanted us to do, give them the cheapest raw materials. And that's why a country like Ghana with so much bamboo in the western region will still import toothpicks and matches. And it's a huge indictment on our forefathers like Osajifo, who had seen the need to have a productive sector which will continue to provide the foundation on which to stand. Because once you eat, a hungry man is an angry man. All across Africa, we have resources, but our people are going without. So we must stand up and take the tough decisions. And if every African nation holds their leader responsible and do away with the politics of what we do these days, which is the party politics and this and that, and hold the leaders responsible, no matter who you are, you've been elected to come and deliver, and they must work together with themselves, and that's where the AU needs to coordinate that work. So if we have 54 leaders in Africa who are afraid not to disappoint the people who elected them, those 54 people will begin to work in unison, because we have the greatest resources. Africa is about 4 times the size of the US. The resources we have would change the way the world is. If Africa stands on its feet, it would be a giant gorilla. Everybody will scatter like the dog is loose. So people don't want the dog to be loose, but the dog has a right to run around the yard. But African leaders must stand up, and the people must show them that we have the power in our hands not to accept this destiny. We have more gold in any district in Ghana, in the Ashanti region, where we find gold, and Western region, than in all the central banks of Europe where they've stashed their gold reserves. So there is something terribly, terribly wrong, and the people must hold the leaders accountable.
Absolutely, Chief. And let me come to you, Nani. I mean, powerful points from Chief. Africa, we have the greatest in terms of we are the greatest. I mean, in terms of resources, we have it all. And like Chief puts it, and yet our people are living without. I mean, what's wrong with us, Nani? What's wrong with our system? And like Andrea said, our brothers and sisters in the diaspora. And when we talk Africa, we're not just talking about those of us here on this continent.
One forceful point.
Yes.
One forceful point that grandfather made. But the African people are united already. The African people being united already. When you see the ordinary people all across the borders that you go to in Africa, there isn't any difference on the two sides. So the problem is not coming from the African people. The problem is the institutions that run Africa. And so the question is, how will organized unity come? People's unity is in existence. Organized unity in terms of the forces that are powerful, in terms of the forces that run the economy. That is where the problem is. And there is a conflict between the organized force that run the continent and the way the African people want to live. You go from Aplau to Lome, you don't see any problem. You go to Semapoda, the other side, you will not see any problem. But like that, in the way we control our resources, is where the problem is. That's why I was bringing in something which has just happened in South Africa. It might not appear to many people
as significant by significant. In fact, I don't know if the youth leader is such what effect it will have. But when the youth of the ANC, Julius Malema, was removed, was sent out of the ANC, the father he stood up for the getting the land of the people back. The father he stood for the Marikana miners. Made it that a party that had been formed in just 9 months has taken 25 seats in the national parliament and has the opposition in 2 provincial legislatures. And so I see the true unity for Africa coming not from the governments that we have today, but from the grassroots, where the people already want unity and they need forces that articulate this unity which they want and which they act as exist. The ordinary people may applaud, they are not the people who are treating themselves bad, the border guards who are part of the state, who are part of the colonial extension, which is called the state today, are the ones creating problem. The other thing I want to say is that
can we hold that point 1 minute? Can we hold that point 1 minute, my brother? And the only reason for that is that we want to go to Togo and then to come back to that point, since our brother from Togo can only be on the line for a short time. Member of Parliament for Western St. Mary here in Jamaica, but he's now in Lomé, Togo, and has just completed an interparliamentary conference on the Arms Trade Treaty implementation. We believe that when we talk about Africa unity, we must also talk about African defense and African security. And Jolian Silvera, Member of Parliament in the Jamaican government, joining us now from Togo. Jolian, good morning. Welcome from Togo.
Good morning. How are you?
We're doing very well. We're simulcasting live, as you know, with Ghana. Say you're in Togo, just next door to Ghana. Say hello to the folks in Ghana, Mr. Silvera.
First and foremost, I must say good morning to all the listeners. And it's a wonderful, bright, sunshiny day this side.
Okay, brilliant. We're happy to hear that. I know that you have just completed a interparliamentary conference on the Arms Trade Treaty. In a nutshell, can you tell us what was achieved, if anything? I know that there are some big questions. There are oppositions from groups that worry about the impact of gun owners and gun manufacturers in the United States. We know that on the continent of Africa itself, there are some African countries that are not necessarily comfortable with the Arms Trade Treaty. Can you tell us what was achieved at the conference that you attended, the interparliamentary conference?
In a nutshell, this conference was held by ONREC, the United Nations Regional Center for Peace and Disarmament in Africa. And we had basically the entire West African region, consisting of about 15 countries from West Africa in attendance. Countries from the Caribbean and Latin America were also in attendance. Basically what is taking place is that they want to sign a treaty, get it ratified within their parliament, that it's taken to the UN Council, that how arms are distributed worldwide. The major arms producers are accountable for the distribution, and that distribution is also in proportion. Because several things came up from the whole dialogue, the two and a half days, is that most of these African countries are dependent on the major 5 developed countries for development, to implement development into their countries. For example, United States, Russia, China, we all want them to invest in our country so we have growth and we have the proper infrastructural things in place in our country. But on the other hand, what they're saying, the United States is disagreeing. China is also disagreeing. And I think Europe is the EU is the only body which has literally agreed from the big 5 nations to produce small weapons.
On what grounds? Are the United States and China?
Well, the United States presently is saying that in their constitution, they have a right to bear arms. And that is also going against some of the language which is in this treaty. Because even examining the treaty, what I found out is that there's a lot of ambiguity there. And the ambiguity in the treaty suggests to me that, and when I pose the question, they're all in agreement that because of the language, it is interpretation of the language. And therefore, it comes back down to the bigger players can twist it or interpret it in their way, and they will be beneficial.
Mm-hmm. But at the same time, Jolian, it seems to me that Africa and the African diaspora, including Jamaica, have a vested interest in ensuring that there is something in place to stem the proliferation of small arms, small weapons that seem to flood our shores. We do not make them, and then conflicts are stoked by mercenaries who tell us that we... Yes, go ahead, Jolian.
I suspect, Andrew, that, it's very hard for us as a developing nation. We don't have that technology. But one thing I'm sure of is that these developed countries or nations, they know if a pin is coming into their country, and they know if a pin is leaving their country. So it would be best interest if technology is applied to help these developing nations, because they have all the satellite imagery. They can track anything they want to track. You understand? So they know exactly what is taking place across the board.
Right, and that has been said, and that's a point that has been raised many times, both on the continent of Africa and in the African diaspora, especially when we begin to talk about AFRICOM at a time when we are talking about African unity and African independence and African liberation, and at a time when we are talking about the Caribbean Basin Security Initiative, where we're seeing the militarization by the U.S. of the Jamaican and the Caribbean waters, and the militarization on the continent of Africa. That the conflict, it seems, is within America's own foreign policy and in furthering their own interests in the Caribbean waters and on the continent of Africa, while it appears that we seem to have this opposition to ratifying the small arms trade treaty, the arms trade treaty.
Just for note, Jamaica has signed on, and based on email which we got on Friday, we'll be sending it back to Parliament to ratify.
Yes.
So in full support of it. So we're way ahead of the board game.
So Jamaica is about to ratify. Can you tell us which African states are opposing? Do you know?
Up to the time, we had only 2 African states which had signed. Further on, the following day, I think another 7 called in to say that, they will sign this treaty.
Yes.
So we're hoping, this is just in West Africa, But in general, you need all, 52, 54 states to sign, and they have reached up to 40.
50,
yes. Right.
I understand.
It's an ongoing process.
Yes.
And the thing about it is that, as I said, the language in the treaty, it varies according to the capital weight you have in this world.
Mm-hmm.
And I need not to go any further.
Well, we will discuss that further, but in a minute, Jolian, can you say if there was discussion at the Interparliamentary Conference on the extent to which defense and security are yes, go ahead.
No, that was on the front burner also, because questions came up, and question was posed that if we were developing, or let's just use an isolated case like say Sudan now, which is a hot topic.
Yes.
Because it's natural gas territory.
Yes.
And 10 years ago, people were nomads. Now, when they found out that there were gases there, everybody starts to own the land, and then they come north and south, and that is where the internal wrangling start to take place.
Mm-hmm.
So what you find out is that investments, let's say, coming from China, because the Chinese are there, and also the Chinese are in, and I'm speaking to somebody from Sudan, so they're telling me these things. So the Chinese are in.
In what?
On the other hand, No, in Sudan, no. You know,
Okay, of
they're
course,
developing
yes.
the country.
Yes, yes.
Right? So the Chinese are there. The other thing, on the other hand, because of the embargoes which were put against Iran, what you have now is that the Iranians are controlling majority of what you call the cash flow in Sudan. So they're owning all businesses, etc., etc. And the Sudanese now, what they said, and it's documented, that they, in exchange, are making ammunition.
All right, hold that point for me. Hold that point for me, Jolian. We're going to ask you to hang up. We'll call you right back in Togo because we do have to go to the Super Lotto draw. So hold that point and we'll call you right back. Is that okay?
Okay.
All right, thanks. To Prime Eye, do you want to continue your conversation while we go to our Super Lotto draw?
Yes, Andrea, we're actually getting ready to wrap it up here from Accra, Ghana.
All right, can you hold? Can we come back in another 2 minutes and you wrap up? Let's just take this draw. We do have to join this Supreme bench. All right. Okay, listen up. Listen up, dollars, pick 2, pick 3, pick 4, cash pot, early birds draw up next, and that's coming in just a moment, 8:30. Now 8:35, you're inside of the Africa Forum, Running African, and from Ghana, the simulcast is about to wind down. We will rejoin Jolian Silvera, in any case, in Togo, right after we have said our goodbyes, as we rejoin Prime Eye and his special guests in studio in Ghana.
Then the likes of Gaddafi say no. We should produce a practical solution out of Abuja Treaty that gave birth to the African Central Bank, then African Investment Bank. Central Bank to be headquarters in Abuja, investment and reconstruction in Tripoli. Then Cameroon had reconstruction. Okay, where is the money coming from? It has to come from the people's resources. If you only have one country that is in charge of the people's resources, which is Tripoli. So Tripoli must volunteer to pump in billions of dollars. And they demonstrated that by advancing money for the construction of the buildings. Somehow history will continue the rest. But if you have the current crop who don't think of the necessity of unity, and you have Nigeria, which is under low intensity civil war, and have another neighbor like Ghana that cry out for resources, and they take where the resources are, they are not in charge. If you look at all these little confusions and the madness that is going on in the head of the people, the characters, you can't put two together, and you keep wondering, I mean, whether they are rebels or not, with all this mix of confusion, the solution lies nowhere but that political arrangement. Because you see, what happened? Goodluck somehow, see, state actors, according to realists, actors have absolute control under certain circumstances. This has been a theory, but under Goodluck, Johnatan, we can see it manifesting practically. That Goodluck, even though he claims he is a president of Nigeria, somehow Boko Haram has imposed curfew on there. And then he also went to parliament, he also has imposed what they call it, some law, you know, whatever it is. They passed some law, I think, last Friday. Okay. But he is under curfew. Because he can't move to those areas that the abduction is taking place. They claim out of security.
a whole president, security. What is the work of the Nigeria Defense Force then?
In your country.
Okay. So we need to intensify the education among the grassroots. That you see, the current leadership are not interested. You see, the entire neo-colonial construct serve the interest of the class elite that we have, the bourgeois class, because it service and protect their creature comfort. That is why many people in this country, you ask, but the guy when he was campaigning, he said this, but as he go there, Charlie, it changed his life. Oh. You see, when you get there, you see that comfort zone which you have envisaged, which was an idealistic, mental construct, has somehow manifest when you get there. So they don't want to move. Okay. I remember Julius Nyerere when he was here in 1995. That was Ghana's 40th. 97. Yes, 97. At the 40th independent anniversary, I guess. Yes, he said that from the speech you played out. When he was here in 58, he was so scared and nervous.
When he was 65,
No.
The 58.
No, 58. 58. Was the first one. All the liberation forces were brought to Accra.
Yes.
All right. He said he was so nervous that he's been wondering whether he will walk out from the conference in Accra and be a president.
Okay. Motion of unity, and they were afraid that when there's unity, it means
no.
Okay.
He said this when he was a guest of honor. Okay. Yeah, that is what he said. Because Nkrumah was pushing for the kind of radicalism that he is not accommodative of. More so, at the time, he was also entertaining that cravings that he will one day become head of state. That powerful man called Nkrumah is tabling something that probably if he's not careful, that will elude him.
Okay, grandfather. So, we have to, unfortunately, have to end it.
We have to wrap. We who are concerned with the, I might be misquoting Sergeant Kwame Nkrumah, with the immediacy of African unity and African independence, are not prepared to wait on history, but we're prepared to give history a revolutionary push. I think after listening to the conversation, after listening to this to give history a revolutionary push. I think after listening to the conversation, after listening to this insightful discussion coming from Ghana, that we can leave with the words of Assaji for Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. Are we prepared then to give history a revolutionary push? Because I think this is one thing we're going to have to decide even as we move away from here. The struggle has slowed down. A lot of our own people are traitors in our midst. A lot of us have been co-opted by academia, co-opted by politics, co-opted by capitalism, and have moved away from the radicalism of the 60s and the 70s that drove the Pan-African struggle and put us on the path that we actually are on, but that there hasn't been much movement in terms of the greater and wider African unity. Are we prepared then to give a history a revolutionary push?
Many thanks, Andrea, all the way from IRA FM in Jamaica, and it's been a great simulcast today, May 25, 2014, here in Accra on Radio Gold 90.5 FM. Let me say a big thank you to our guests here in the studio. To you, Grandfather Ito Meka, Pan-Africanist, Santwa, editor of Shekere Magazine, an African History, Culture and Development Quarterly, Chief Kweku Ando, who is also a Pan-Africanist, and Nani Kofi Explo, editor of Kilombo Magazine. And maybe I can also end with these. from His Excellency Kofi Batsa, a member of the Kwame Nkrumah entourage at the OAU conference in 1963. He said, I sat behind Nkrumah when he spoke to the OAU conference in Addis Ababa in 1963, and I watched the faces of the leaders as he left his prepared script and pointing at each in turn, at Haile Selassie, at Tafawa Balewa, at Modibo Keita, at Maga. He said, if we do not come together, if we do not unite, we shall all be thrown out, all of us, one by one. And also, I will also go. He said the OAU must face a choice now. We can either move forward to progress through our effective African interference, through our effective African Union, or step backward into stagnation, instability, and confusion. He got a standing ovation for that, and although he felt he should have been calmer, we felt he should have been calmer, and that perhaps he had gone too far. His reaction was, let me tell them, he said. These are words of His Excellency Kofi Batsa, a member of Osajefo entourage at the OAU conference. Sadly enough, it happened that all these four, as well as Nkrumah, were violently thrown out in a coup d'etat, with some of them dying during the coup. So, Nkrumah somehow proved to be a prophet as well.
Thank you very much, Primai. Thank you very much, my brother. Really a heartening conversation this morning. Going to be leaving the Ghanaian audience with the sound of Africa Unite. Oh, you've got your own there? Okay, we'll go with yours then. And it's time for news right after this.
Listen to Radio Go. Listen to Radio Go. We are the children.
News coming up in a moment. We are going to go to the Gambia to speak with Mutabaruka after the news. We're also going to go back to Togo, and we hope to go back to South Africa. So much more to do inside of this program on this Africa Liberation Day.
'Cause we're moving right out of Babylon. I tell you who we are. Under the sun.
All right, Cheryl standing by for the local, or with the local and international headlines coming up right now.
Jamaican poet, radio personality and university lecturer Mutabaruka has praised Gambia for embarking on a food security initiative similar to what is being advocated by the Jamaican government. According to reports from allafrican.com, Mutabaruka praised the food security strategy of President Yahya Jammeh, saying the concept of eating what you grow and growing what you eat is a brilliant initiative. He said that in order to save African farmers from what he called exploitative foreign companies, it will be important for Africans to eat what they grow. Mutabaruka was participating in the 11th edition of the International Roots Homecoming Festival in Gambia. He said the initiative should be expanded to other African countries in view of the fact that the continent has been receiving so many things that are brought from America and Europe. Mutabaruka hailed President Jammeh's Pan-Africanist ideals, pointing to the advocacy of Rastafarians in Jamaica who have been championing the cause for a link with Africa. He also commented on Gambia's low crime rate, saying it contrasts sharply with Jamaica's that is often highlighted by the media. I'm Cheryl Johnson.
Thank you very much, Cheryl, with the Johnson with the local and international headlines. IRFM's Sunday Sports Diary is up next, and Robert Williams is standing by with that right after this. Now, 8:55, Robert Williams is up next with IRFM's Sunday Sports Diary. How are you, Mr. Williams?
I'm good.
Wow, good news with the relay team there.
Yeah, that was great going yesterday.
Yes, man, love that.
Great going.
Right, lots of things happening yesterday, including the Real Madrid 93rd minute.
Oh, no.
What a sad story.
Well, sad depends on where you're sitting.
I was with the underdog. I went with the underdog.
Okay.
I mean, I wasn't following it closely, but kind of had an idea what was happening. I still never I didn't even watch it, but just getting into the pieces here and there.
It's hard for a team to equalize in the in stoppage time and then come back and beat you.
Well, I'm going to tell you.
It's hard, it's hard.
93rd minute, man. I'm sure they didn't sleep last night and still don't sleep all this. Can you imagine what that would have meant?
Yeah, that's as close as it gets. You're leading 1-0 into full time.
Yeah.
It's injury time you're into now. And that forced it into extra time.
Wow.
And then you're blown away in extra time.
And what an upset that would have been.
Well,
it would have been an upset. I beg Robert, don't do that. Don't do that. Nobody expected. I have not seen the only person who said that Real Madrid would have lost were people who were just going with the underdog for going with the underdog's sake and betting a big bag of money on it. Nobody expected them to lose.
Be any such big upset, it would have happened already. Atletico Madrid was in the final.
I know, but even getting to the final was a big deal, and that is why every commentator apart from yourself.
That is why it is no big surprise again.
No, the big surprise. Big upset.
It
would have won.
It wouldn't be that big an upset, Andre. It would have been a surprise result, but not a major upset. It's two teams in the final. It's two teams left in it.
You know, so we are talking whenever you use the word major. We just say it would have been a big upset.
It's not big again. The fact that you're in the final is not so big again. You're in the final now, you know.
Rosberg, I'm not going to argue because I don't see what the argument is about. Rosberg was on pole in a controversial pole, and same thing happened to your friend Schumacher back in the day, and he was disqualified. And Rosberg was not disqualified, so it wasn't his fault. So he was on pole yesterday.
What happened to Rosberg yesterday?
He went to parking or something like that, and then the safety car, the yellow flag come up, and Hamilton, who was behind, but just a breath of a second behind, had to slow down, and that secured Rosberg's pole. And the investigations went on for nearly 2 hours. And then they finally came back and said, it wasn't his fault, so he's on pole.
They shook hands before the race started. And
they shook hands afterwards. But Rosberg said it wasn't his fault. Hamilton said he should have done his fastest lap before the last lap. And we're thinking about Schumacher, but we're also thinking about Ayrton Senna and Alan Prost, and that conflict on and off the field between both of them. And a lot of people are asking questions about whether or not we have a similar situation of teammates, Rosberg and Hamilton. They're teammates at Mercedes.
Yes. But they're not the best of friends.
They seem pretty friendly, up until yesterday.
I guess they're pretty friendly in front of the camera, but not that they're enemies, but they're rivals.
But the rivalry is just heating up here now. And that's why people are thinking about it. It's getting hotter. It really is getting hotter. And Hamilton says he thinks he's going to take the Senna high road. But we don't expect him to take all of Senna's road, considering, what happened in the end.
No, but you see, it is the competitive spirit of competitors.
Yes.
I mean, if they want to win.
And you see,
and they don't want to give anything away.
And with Formula One, this team thing, let's say, because we heard last week when last race, it was in Spain, no gain, and it was Monaco yesterday, today, the full Monty. Hamilton was told was it to hold back? Was he told to hold back? What happened to Hamilton? But anyway, he said when he won the race,
team instruction.
Yeah, he walked out of the, when he was coming out of the vehicle, they were asking him some question. He said, "We're going to talk about that strategy when I get in," and that was the first indication that he was not comfortable with the idea that he must hold back for.
Yeah, because him not taking any program.
No,
he's a competitor and he's going there to win. Yes, and nothing wrong with that.
No.
Totally,
I would like the little rivalry too. I mean, I mind the little rivalry. We don't want to get as heated as Senna and Prost because that was too much.
The rivalry is not something that they have to plan. It will manifest.
No, it is manifesting, and Senna and Prost never planned it either.
Right.
I mean, it happened, and one left the team and so on. But we don't expect that this is any plan. This is happening. They can't help it.
Happening.
And so today, Rosberg was first, Hamilton second, Ricardo third, Alonso. Where did Ferrari come in?
Wow.
DJ Whistle, how you doing, my brother? You know, Whistle had a little date today and I was supposed to relieve him. And he decided that no, because he has to stay, he has to watch the race and all of that. And
the race finished now.
Whistle, I just know you feel, my brother.
So, what is it now with Vettel?
He crashed out, didn't he?
No.
Vettel
competed for 6 laps.
After car failure.
Yeah, the engine just wouldn't. But him sound like him didn't want to cuss though, Like he was saying.
His
team. He said, "Come on, guys."
Oh, not again.
And then he said, "Come on, guys," and then said, "I know you're doing everything you can."
Oh, and pull it back. He pulled it back.
Why? When you see, that is how sport is, When you are on top, you can't do nothing wrong.
Right.
But you see, if it is going against you, you can't do nothing.
Are you talking about the world champion, the top of the champion, right?
Exactly.
Oh,
nothing has gone right.
Well, I'm happy with what's happening with him.
Yeah.
But I got fed up of him last year.
That's the point I am making.
Right.
Him just couldn't do anything wrong.
Right.
And even if him do anything wrong, him still end up right.
Yes.
But that's how sport is.
That's how sport is.
That is how you balance it.
And that is why,
that's the balance.
If Real Madrid had lost yesterday, it would have been a big upset.
It would have been a balance.
May I play a song for you, sir? Are you a song next? Oh, goodness.
I never want Real Madrid to win.
Oh, that's why you're saying that. No, but I never want Real Madrid to win either.
Not that I have anything against Real Madrid,
exactly.
But I prefer if, another team won.
And that's what I was thinking to myself. So in the end, we agree. Happy African Liberation Day.
All right, same to you. All right.
At 7 minutes now after 9 o'clock. It's African Liberation Day, and we do want to get in some phone calls, but we have to hurry back to Togo and then dash down to the Gambia and probably just sprint across to South Africa. It's African Liberation Day. We're doing it the only way we know how to, right, Mr. Williams? Yes. So this is how we're doing it. So Member of Parliament for Western St. Mary, Jolian Silvera, he was on earlier. He attended the Interparliamentary Conference on the Arms Trade Treaty implementation. We want to talk some more about that. He's telling us that Jamaica is ratifying the treaty, and a little background to the Arms Trade Treaty. It was adopted April 2013 by the UN, signed by the US last September, but they're waiting for the 2/3 vote in the Senate. And for the treaty to enter in force, it has to receive 50 ratifications globally. The big question ahead is, as the treaty is facing opposition from groups. Some of these groups are concerned about the impact that this will have on gun owners and gun manufacturers in the US. I say the impact it will have on mercenaries and traffickers, as we saw in the Ivory Coast, as we see unfolding in Sudan, as we see unfolding in Somalia with Al-Shabaab. Where are these people getting guns from? Boko Haram and so on. Where are they getting guns from? Who's arming these people is a question, because these guns are not made in Africa. In Jamaica, similar situation. These guns are not made here. So let us get back to Togo. The Arms Treaty, and it has great potential and significance for conflict and insecurity in Africa. We don't think that it by itself can do it. There has to be a multifaceted approach to the problems we're having on the continent and in the diaspora in terms of crime and violence, in terms of conflict. But in the meantime, how do we stop the proliferation of small arms? We are hearing now about Al-Qaeda in the Maghreb, in the Sahel, and that's another story to discuss at another time. M23 in the DRC, Boko Haram in Nigeria, Al-Shabaab in Somalia, and so on. Where these groups are springing up all over the continent of Africa, and wherever there are lots of weapons. Questions to be asked and answered. And so Africa's dependence and even Jamaica's dependence and the Caribbean's dependence on the U.S. To track, to regulate, and to control the amount of small arms entering our countries. This dependence is too great, and this is something that if we are going to talk about African independence, then we have to talk about independence in relation to defense, in relation to security. How do we move from here?
Africa unite, 'cause we're moving right.
The Africa Union is telling us now that some 20% of the world's small arms and light weapons are to be found in Africa. This is what we're hearing now. And what that does and what these statistics do is that they pave the way for AFRICOM. And we see the weakness of Nigeria in the kidnapping of the 300 girls and the bending over to be violated by France and the U.S. Nigeria had just rejected the setting up of AFRICOM headquarters in Nigeria, but now they've got more than AFRICOM as a result of what's happening with Boko Haram and the kidnapping of over 300 girls who still have not yet been found. But at the same time, America has sent drones and 80 how much? 80,000? 80 something? Soldiers. whole soldiers to Nigeria. And we have drones flying over Nigeria and Cameroon and Mali and... So what this has done, the kidnapping of the 300 girls and the way that Nigeria has not dealt with it, is that it has opened all of that area now to that which they themselves had rejected. A very weak government in Nigeria, so that AFRICOM has now taken root. That which they had rejected before, now they are bending over backwards to accommodate under a different name, but it's the same thing, because we're told that AFRICOM will now be training a battalion of Nigerian soldiers. Nigeria that is largely responsible for the security in the Africa Union could not take care of its own security. There are some questions we have to ask and answer. How does Africa begin to find solutions to regional conflicts, civil conflicts? And we have to identify those who are stoking these conflicts, because we know mercenaries are in the middle of all of these conflicts. We have a similar situation here in Jamaica in terms of the illegal imports and trafficking of weapons from countries outside of the Caribbean, from countries outside of Africa. These weapons manufactured by multinational corporations in the United States.
Africa unite, 'cause we're moving right.
And yet we do not think, it doesn't seem as if, the U.S. will get that 2/3 majority, because already they are questioning the treaty. They've got a right to bear arms, they say. As we go back to the phone lines, I think we're back again in Togo with Member of Parliament for Western St. Mary, Jolian Silvera, who is attending the Interparliamentary Conference on the Arms Trade Treaty implementation. Jolian, you're back with us?
Yes, I am.
All right, brilliant. All right, we're no longer simulcasting with Ghana, but all of Ghana heard you early on. We're still broadcasting live on the internet, though, at irefm.net, so we welcome our listeners from across the world. We are getting your tweets, so we know that you are tuned in from Europe and from the continent of Africa, from the United States and the Caribbean. Thank you very much for joining us. And to our listeners on the 107s on this African Liberation Day, May 25, making the rounds across the continent of Africa. And we were talking just before we took that long break, Jolian, about the Arms Trade Treaty. One of the points you made is that Jamaica has ratified the treaty. Did I hear you right?
We have signed on, and I think before the end of this parliamentary session, we should be ratifying it. So we're way advanced.
All right, and no pressure from the United States to do otherwise, to wait?
No, there's none from the United States. From United States is of concern because out of the 5 producing armed nations, the United States, China, and Russia have not signed up. Only the European Union.
All right, but America did sign something on the Arms Trade Treaty last September. Is it that they have signed but they have not ratified? What's the difference there?
What they're saying in general is that what the treaty is stating is that they already have something similar already, which exists. Mm-hmm. So, as I said, when you read the treaty, ambiguity is all over it.
Yes.
So, it is the interpretation of the treaty from which perspective, from your side or from the other side, makes it acceptable.
Mm-hmm. But was part of this conference a working out or a hammering, or this is a treaty this is the final treaty?
We have sent the declaration, and it was written. All of us contributed to it. Yes. It was working out some issues which exist, because I think one thing which came right across, it just hit immediately when you heard the other nations speaking. It is that because the ONREC or the UN, it is a ministerial government to government. Mm-hmm. So it goes to the Foreign Affairs Ministry and also the Security Ministry. Mm-hmm. So when you are an MP, you're not really privy to discussions which are taking place. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the persons, a lot of other members of Parliament were saying that they didn't even see the treaty. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It was basic.
All right, you're saying that there's ambiguity in the treaty, but for our listeners, what would you say would be then the main gist of the treaty in terms of the proliferation of small arms and weapons?
What they want in general is that the arms makers, the manufacturers, they want like a register exists. So therefore, if they pick up arms, let's say somewhere in South Africa or West Africa, they know exactly where it is coming from. Mm-hmm. So they can trace it back, who are the producers, who produced it, who purchased it, and how it was distributed. Because what you're finding out is that, there are many, I saw figures which were astonishing. They said that there are something like maybe about 11 million small arms just between Iraq and Iran coming down into Africa. Yes. These are numbers which are staggering. They said that since the topple of Libya, the small arms is a big trade. It's like where they had hoarded them or stashed, and you have these mercenaries now selling them. There's another, so it goes on and it goes on. Yes. But interestingly, I'm going to say some things, and I sat beside the parliamentary representative from Malaya, and there's outcry there now. There's civil unrest, yes. And she said there, which shocked me. She said, "How come we are here signing?" Or trying to debate on this arms trade treaty and trying to get everybody on board. But yet in my village where I stood, I saw UN representatives handing guns to rebels.
That's a question. That is a question.
Then when the Democratic, the DG Congo, they said that instead of throwing food from the helicopters, the UN helicopters and the American helicopters or whatever, they're throwing weapons and ammunition down on the ground.
So here we have a situation where we have known this for a very long time, but representatives are coming out of these countries, from Mali, from the DRC, and are saying, listen, we are seeing in our own villages, we're seeing in our own territories that the United Nations is complicit in arming rebels and stoking the fires of civil conflicts and regional conflicts in Africa. So then the question that the representatives from Mali asks is, how come we sit down here then to sign the Arms Trade Treaty when this is happening? So this is hypocrisy. What does that mean? What's the end of that? What does that mean?
The Brazilian representative, because Brazil is also a manufacturer of small arms, and he said to my astonishment is that they started to mark bullets. So they found out a way how to mark bullets, to list them, number them, so they can be registered.
Yes.
And when this is the representative, you know, and he said that when they started to have discussion, because the United States said that there's no way they can mark any bullets. It's virtually impossible. Brazil said yes, they can. They showed him. And the United States, he said, was upset with Brazil for showing the world its technology. And as a matter of fact, he even stood up, you know, because he really got upset. And he said, where are the other major arm makers beside Sweden? Where is the United States? Where is China? Where is Russia? Where is Germany? Where is France? Nobody attended.
They did not attend the conference?
No.
Okay, well, that in itself is very, very telling. It reminds me of the reparations conference in South Africa, where at least they sent representatives, but at the end of the day, they pulled out and did not attend. And we'll see what happened. All right, so Jolian, a lot of work to be done. You attended this conference. Does that mean that now you're going to be more involved? There'll be a follow-up, and we'll hear much more from you.
Yeah, we had discussions that the Honorary is trying to see how best we will host this conference in the Latin America, and ask them to choose Jamaica as their destination.
All right. Well, when you come in, we'd really like to have you in the studio to answer questions from our callers regarding some of the discussions that took place there. Thank you very much. We had a good day at Taki High School.
You have to give me 1 minute.
Yes.
1 minute.
Yes, go ahead.
Because I personally would like to thank everybody, including IRI FM, for the massive support for the Taki High School Labor Day project.
Yes.
I'd like to thank persons from RADA, HART, not JN Building Society, the Past Students Association, especially the community groups. We had persons from Kingston College, Ochoa College, Couples, NWC, Industrial Cleaning, National Commercial Bank, course. We had so many persons on board. The figures at the day when I checked, were in excess of 700 people.
That's true.
Attendance.
That's true. I was there, and I saw that myself. And even when it was rained in the morning, yes.
I'd also like to thank personally Mr. Paul Falloon and Jermaine White, who spearheaded it, because I'm overseas and I really wanted to be there. So big up to everybody who participated, and I heard it was a wonderful.
It certainly was. Day. It certainly was. Great work, Mr. Jolian Silvera.
And the last thing, Jamaica is so international. When I came here, it's French speaking, and I went on the streets and persons asked me where I'm from, and I said Jamaica. And the amount of persons who want to come to Jamaica, based on what they have heard, they identified it with Bob Marley. They identified it with Sizzler. They identified it with Usain Bolt. And even one person came up to me and said, you have female presidents like we. I said, no. And I said, yes, we are very well known.
Yes.
And last night, I went out to a village and they have the live music. Yes. And for the hour and a half I was there, 1 hour and 20 minutes was reggae.
So we sent you to cover the conference, to participate in the conference, and you were down there shelling down the place?
They're singing in French.
Look here, we have to go because we're going to the Gambia to join Mutabaruka, who is in the Gambia. Because listen, Jamaican people are all over Africa. Now, African Jamaicans are home, including yourself. And so enjoy Togo. We look forward to talking to you when you come forward. Yes, all right. Jolian Silvera. Yeah, all right. Jolian Silvera, the Member of Parliament for Western St. Mary. He is in Lomé, Togo. Just completed an interparliamentary conference. It is African Liberation Day. Mutabaruka is on the line from Gambia. We're going to take a quick break and come right back. Muta, can you hold?
I hope
so. All right. Well, let me see how quick we get to this break. 26 minutes now after 9 o'clock. It's African Liberation Day, May 25, and we are making the connection with Africa, all parts of Africa. And from the Gambia, Mutabaruka, who has been there, he's been to Senegal also, joins us now on the phone lines. Muta, welcome to Running African. We miss you, but good to have you in the Gambia. All right, we're going to go quickly, Muta, to talk about, because we're talking about African unity and we've been talking about that all morning. And when we talk about African unity, of course, we have to talk about the African diaspora, not just continental Africa. And part of that unity has to do with the ability of Africans in the diaspora to move across, in between the continent of Africa. This has been a long-standing concern of yours. I know that this is something you have talked about in Ghana. You have met with persons in the highest places. You have met with persons in the highest places in Senegal talking about this. And here you are in Gambia putting the issue of the right to return on the table, especially as it impacts visa requirements. Tell us about that.
I think this time it is the first time I actually believe that, well, I did believe it in Senegal until the Prime Minister lost the election. Yes. He actually agreed with me and then he lost the election. This is the first time I think that something will definitely be done and it will have a ripple effect in this part of Africa because of the proximity with Senegal and the proximity with Ghana, Sierra Leone, and all these countries. So I am still pushing for it. I'm still here talking to people of authority who can make a difference. Even though I got the word from the ministry and from the vice president that this would take place. So I am still on it, and I don't intend to let it go.
All right, so Muta, tell us what you've achieved, because there's some progress in terms of even your own self, and that is opening the way for all of the rest of us and for the Caribbean. So talk to us about that progress.
All right, the progress is that we had this meeting with the vice president and the minister of culture and tourism. And basically, they agreed with me. They said it would be done. The minister gave me the thing that said yes. I asked her if it will be done in 50 years, 40 years, or 20 years. Mm-hmm. She mumbled on her mouth and said 50 days. So I have still said yes. I mean, politician is politician, but it would appear to me because of you see, what was happening is that I made this pronouncement on a show where thousands of Gambians were present. And it had a ripple effect all over the newspaper and also on the television. And it could not be ignored.
Yes.
So that ripple effect still exists up to today, African Liberation Day. And it keeps reverberating right across Gambia and Senegal because the news reports not only come from Gambia but into Senegal, because it's one country.
Yes, and Muta, it is all over Africa because allafrica.com, which covers the entire Africa, have been reporting on that. And also, I mean, you made the news this morning again, coming straight from allafrica.com, talking about the food, how the Gambia is dealing with food security and the extent to which the rest of Africa should take a leave from the page of the president of Gambia.
See, I was trying to show them that it would be nice for Gambia to take the initiative we talk about the visa requirement. If Gambia could only relinquish that idea, it would have a ripple effect, considering that Niaah, the president, is seen as a Pan-Africanist, and it would really be something of value for Gambia if the president would take the initiative. What I'm thinking too is that the AU is somewhere where we could make this even wider. And I think that is one of the ways to go to, where, because we are a member, Jamaica is a member of the AU.
Of course, and we have a representative right here in Jamaica.
I don't think that Jamaica is using its status in the AU as how it should be used. So I think that we as Pan-Africanists and Rastafari should put more pressure on the government of Jamaica to see how our voices can be heard in the AU, to the point where we're talking about now visa and other aspects. My issue was that if the visa did not go through as I had expected, I would want a passport. Jamaicans who came here, we are now in the process of getting passport, where if you have a national passport from, like, let me say, Gambia, you can travel through Africa without a visa. So the next alternative is to give a passport.
But Muta, are you sure about that, Muta? That a Gambia passport will allow you to travel throughout Africa without a visa?
Yes.
Okay.
So that is my... What you say?
No, I'm just saying, okay, I didn't know. I thought that, because I know there okay.
Well, that was my other alternative, because I'm trying to work out all the different angles, right? And I am recognizing that if Jamaicans, especially those who came here, could have a visa, could have a passport, it would allow us to enter Africa with this Gambian passport, and then if you want to go to Senegal, Ghana, Trinidad, Ethiopia, and all these places, it would allow us to go through without a visa. And that is my next alternative. But I would prefer to see the relinquishing of visa
But
Muta, part of the world.
Can I just make an aside and say something just off the cuff?
Yes.
Do you know that you have an African accent now?
Yes, because I'm an African people on the continent, Mama. Trust me, I remember talking all up and you understand what I'm saying. I'm Mandinka, and you understand what I'm saying. I am like Jamaicans who went to America and started to speak American even when they reach the airport in Norman, man.
I am loving it though. I'm really loving it, but I just had to say it because I know I'm not the only person hearing the African accent. So Muta, what have you? So some more up for us, please, and so on.
No, I can't talk the world up, wall up. But I just want to make an issue here.
Yes, go ahead.
This thing about Boko Haram is a very serious problem. In Africa here, where we see the incompetence of an African state, which is the richest African country in Africa and also the most populated, and they have to draw from America and France to solve a serious domestic problem that is getting out of hand.
The question, Muta, is did they have to draw from America and France? That's a question.
No, they don't have to.
Exactly.
They don't have to. But let me just say that the incompetence of African leaders to deal with African problems and find solutions for Africa is something that needs to be addressed. It needs to be addressed.
And immediately.
A lot of people is not even recognizing, because we hear about America all the while, and we hear about China and the Arabs all the while. But seriously, we have to look at what France is doing in Africa. Because we must remember that the majority of Africans in the north of Africa and in the western part of Africa, all of them speak French.
And one of the things, the French neo-colonialism and French colonialism in Africa. One of the things that we're noticing also that it's not totally one-sided, Muta, because if you look at Africa itself, in the Ivory Coast, in Mali, in Cameroon and so on, as soon as there's an issue, the very first thing they do is to run to France. And
we must realize what happened in Mali. If we take what happened in Mali as a precedent of what is happening, we can see that France is a very dangerous European country when it comes on to the stability of Africa.
Of course, yes.
Yes. We have to recognize that, and we have to recognize the militarization of America in western part of Africa, especially Ghana. And people seem to neglect that.
And before you move on from France, remember that we're seeing France in Haiti. Remember, we're seeing France in Haiti. We're seeing France.
Now, I'm going to say something very disturbing here.
Yes.
Very disturbing.
Yes.
What would Al Qaeda benefit in the Caribbean? Now, you have to think about this.
And I can answer that.
Trinidad and Tobago. That is all I will say.
Right.
Al Qaeda in Caribbean, Trinidad and Tobago, we have to watch it.
And remember, Al Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb is a figment of somebody's imagination, created and placed there. It's not hard for the very same thing to happen in the Caribbean waters, because that is a threat outside of the reality that we've seen the threat, and we have seen how Al Qaeda has been thrown in the faces of many just as a creation to militarize particular areas. So these are some of the issues that we have to talk about. So Muta, as I know you're returning to this part of town very soon. You'll be back on the air on the air Wednesday for the cutting edge, and then Thursday of a stepping razor. We can't wait, but at the same time, thank you very much for the work that you have done and continue to do and are doing now in the Gambia in terms of the restriction, the lifting of visa requirements for Africans in the diaspora who want to travel to the continent of Africa. Gambia might very well be the doorway.
And I just want to tell you that since I'm still here, we are supposed to be attending the president's birthday thing tonight, and also celebrating the African Liberation Day. Okay. And it is very important, and this is something philosophical I want to say here, that we have to identify ourselves as Africans in the diaspora, not as descendants of Africans.
Yes.
Because a lot of people now is claiming Africa.
Of course.
If white people saying that they're Africans, who are Europeans?
And we heard this morning, we heard this morning that Chinese are saying that they're Africans.
Yeah, but it's Africans causing, it's Africans deciding that, it's not the Chinese and the Europeans deciding. It's Africans keep saying that everybody is African. Everybody is not African. A butterfly is not a caterpillar. A bullfrog is not a tadpole.
So we have
Even though the Europeans are descendants of Africans. I am not a descendant of African. I am an African.
It means that we have to define ourselves, and that came out of a conversation this morning. Muta, thank you very much. I'll see if I can squeeze in a few calls and see you on Wednesday.
All
right. Mutabaruka there live from the continent of Africa, from the Gambia this morning on African Liberation Day. When we come back, we take a few phone calls. 9:41, we want to go to the phone line, so take your telephone calls. We're going to take your calls very, very short. Just make your comments and then go. We won't be able to have a conversation because we're going to try and get in as many callers as possible. Thank you very much for listening on the 107s on the internet at irefm.net. And for those persons who have been tweeting and Facebooking, thank you very much. As we go to the phone lines, let me just quickly say 974-5079, 5051, 5043. 974-5079, 5051, 5043 are the numbers to call. The toll-free number is 1-888-991-4152. To the phone lines, Hotep.
Hotep, good morning, Kabu.
Oh, greetings, Nana Essie.
It is so wonderful to hear this morning the biblical cards that come together.
Yeah.
You know, they said, blessed be the tie that binds
Yes.
our heart in one love. And I can hear it. Africa is united.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
And Africa is united because there is so much that we can return to and get ourselves in order. You know, even taking back the remains.
Of course. And that was, as you said back then.
In Gambia.
Yes.
Our brothers and sisters in Ethiopia, it didn't happen a few years ago. It is happening now.
Thank you, Nana
We
Essie.
are moving.
Thank you, Nana
We are
Essie. We're going to make
moving.
it short just to take a few more, but thank you. Nana Essie Boy, Sister Minnie, you know her as also as we take your telephone calls. Hotep?
Morning, Kabu.
Yes, Hotep, my brother. Go ahead.
Yes, I want to congratulate the work that you have been doing.
Midasi, thank you.
However, I would like to highlight that it should have really taken place 2,000 years ago, but it's good that it can take place now.
All right.
However, we have to understand that the people, mindset of the people, are now set on that what is happening between Africa and CARICOM and even the world is not just only divided by the powers of the European and the American, but it's also by religion and politics.
All right, we're going to leave it there, my brother, as we contemplate that and think on that. Good point the brother has made, religion and politics, and how that continues to divide us. Hotep?
Perfect, greetings, Sister Kabu.
Greetings, my brother. Go ahead.
Blessed African Liberation Day to you.
To you too.
We note, you know, that OAU, we know the acronym for OAU, Organization of African Unity.
Yes.
And quite rightly so. The day is named African Liberation Day because unity begets liberation. It is very important for us to note this.
Very, very important.
Unity begets liberation.
Very important, my brother. Can we leave it there? Thank you very much.
Yes, right there.
Brother is correct as we continue to take your telephone calls. Hotep?
Good morning.
Good morning, Hotep.
What's a God, Andrea?
Not much. Fox, give thanks.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Boy, I tell you.
Yes.
Boy, I tell you, man. You see, congratulating you. It's coming like even an understatement because you alone couldn't do it. It's a team of people.
Of course, most definitely so. African unity.
And the whole team.
African unity.
And the whole team. Muta is doing a very good job. You, Ran, and for IRFM to give you and the rest this opportunity of doing this. Believe me, boy, it's really good.
Give thanks, my brother Midasi. Thank you very much.
There's more thing, but it's time limited, so we'll discuss the next thing again.
Yeah, man, give thanks. Taking your telephone calls. Hotep?
Hey, greetings, my sister.
Yes, greetings, my brother.
Long time, you know.
True.
Should I change the name for me?
Go ahead,
That's great. I admire that, you know.
Yeah, man. Quick, yes.
Quick. There's a book. A research was done some time ago. It was called Chinese Human Genome Project. Have you ever seen a project?
I've heard about it, not seen, yes.
Okay, what it's saying, you know, is that the Chinese are Africans, but it was when the Persians invaded Egypt.
Yeah.
They had to run away from Africa.
Right. Well, as Muta was saying, the first civilization, the first man, the oldest person we know, Dinkinish, is in Ethiopia, an African woman, which means everybody came out of Africa. And I think that if we go back that far, then we're saying that everybody's African. But then we have to stop and define ourselves at some point because it can't go so. All right?
And there's a book called The Africans Who Wrote the Bible. There's a long story about that.
All right. We'll leave it there. Thank you, my brother. All right, taking your telephone calls at 974-5079, 5051, 5043. Hotep?
Yes, blessings, Sister Kabo.
Greetings, my brother, Hotep.
Yeah, man, we're giving thanks.
Yes.
You know, we know that our greatest strength is in our unity, you know. And His Majesty tell the NI in 66 when he went to Trinidad, is that as a people, we must try to maintain a monolith of ideology and belief. We have to
the tolerance of criticism and dissent, you know, and know that those are a natural part of growth and prosperity.
Right.
Too much time we try to insist on uniformity, and is in a diversity we have, longevity, you know.
And we have to understand that there's a big difference between uniformity and unity.
Yeah, man. Even from biology, sister, in every species, the more diverse they are, the greater the chances of survival.
Right, and you can check that in the ants, and you can see how unified they are.
Yeah, man. But the important thing is
watch your ants
together and work together, and the things you have in common, and that is the key.
Asantua in Ghana this morning talk about the factual. Watch the ants, my brother. Watch your ants. Unity in diversity. Thank you very much.
Yeah, man.
As we take your telephone calls, 974-5079, 5051, 5043. Hotep?
Dear Lioness.
Greetings, my brother. Greetings.
Yeah, man, and greetings to the whole 7 billion people that them says on planet Earth. I just do this real quick to say.
Yes.
Rastafari say Africa and Africans looking outside Africa for solution when all Africa solution is in Africa.
Give thanks,
so until Africans realize that and know that they have all the ingredients and the things that needed in this modernized world in Africa, and it takes only Africans to solve their problem.
To solve all problems.
There is no problem. These outsiders want to help Africa, but Africa must first look to Africans.
Look to ourselves. Thank you very much, my brother.
And I'm going to leave.
As we take your telephone calls at 974-5079, 5051, 5043, and 1-888-991-4152. One of the things we might have to consider even as we get our unity together is how we get together and in solidarity with other oppressed peoples. All right, as we go back to the phone lines, Hotep?
Greetings, Queen Kabu.
Greetings, my sister.
Blessed love.
Yes.
I just want to say, give thanks for such journalistic works going through Earth at this moment.
Yes.
And I just heard you speak about the ants.
Yes.
King Emmanuel Charles Edwards always teach this to I and I must just observe the ants and follow through within such unity.
Of course.
So we give thanks for that word there come resonate again. And Empress, me hear that I always say we're going to pull Africa to Jamaica and Jamaica to Africa.
Yes.
And with the linkage this morning, great link up, man, because you bring I and I in the diaspora, especially in Jamaica, into Africa, and Africa into Jamaica for I and I to even can exchange reasoning, listening to reason, see how we are thinking on that side and this side. So Empress Esther said, enough love, Empress, and all strength and power through the eye works at this moment.
Medasi, Empress Esther, Medasi.
All the great ancestors are work through the eye.
Give
you
thanks,
understand? And just more strength and more power and unity among us as the ants.
Give thanks,
as Pan-Africanists and African people.
Get a few more in, Empress Esther. Give thanks, Medasi. As we continue to take your telephone call, you're inside of the Africa Forum on this Africa Liberation Day. Hotep? Apume, what does that mean?
That means greetings in Ghana.
All right, Apume. All right, Apume.
This is Fire Queen. I'm feeling so blessed this morning to hear that I have made a journey, and also Muta is there. I really want to let you know that Ghana is ready again now. So Ghana is the next trip because the president wants a connection so bad. So I'm just here to let you know that another trip has to be made, and it has to be to Ghana.
All right.
Because I've been in contact with the president for 6.
Let us keep in touch. We're losing there, but through the door of return, it has been opened. Nana Essie talk about the return of the ancestors to Ghana. Hotep? Yes.
Kakabu.
Greetings.
Yes, sir. It's good to hear that United States of Africa is uniting, but I don't know if it was mentioned or anything was said. What is the United States of Africa doing about the Nigerian girls' situation?
Well, we've been talking about it, and the discussion took place also from Ghana, and it seems to me as if the United States of Africa, which is not yet, is depending on the United States of America and the United States of France and the United States of Europe. to get those girls. And this is one of the issues that Muta just raised. It is a shame that in this day and age, this is where we are. Not because we can't do it ourselves, but because of the dependency syndrome. And one of the things we said earlier this morning, very early this morning, is that the promise of liberation has not been fulfilled. Political liberation, economic liberation has not been fulfilled. And so African Liberation Day must be, for us, a call to action, even in 2014. Thank you, my brother.
You know, another thing is because of fear, you know. They themselves think they might be the next victim if they come out and speak out or act. That is how I see it.
Yes, but we can't fear anything. But thank you, my brother.
No, we should not. Give thanks.
No. We are concerned with the immediacy of African liberation, African independence, African unity. We're not prepared to wait on history. We must give history a revolutionary push, which is what Muta is doing there in the Gambia. Okay, Hotep? Hotep, my brother, go ahead.
Yeah, the other day that you spoke of Sankofa, I think going forward.
Yes.
Going back and looking forward.
Yes.
So, I was thinking on the subject of mathematics and the subject that the sister from that you spoke to this morning raised about Euclid or Euclidean geometry.
Yes.
When I was doing some research on it, and the only thing that could be found from it was that it was taken from Alexander, but they can't prove whether or not somebody actually existed to it. So
yes,
another program we discuss that. Really, I spoke to this morning, didn't have some knowledge of that.
All right, we'll do, and we'll get in touch with her for that. Thank you very much, my brother. A lot of what we'll get in Western research is going to be pointing us to Greece, and we must understand that Greece knowledge is stolen Egyptian knowledge, and we say stolen without apologies. All right, Hotep?
Greetings.
Yes, greetings.
Emma, you're saying that would be greetings in Amharic, Ethiopian language.
Yes.
I've been listening to the program this morning, and I must say I'm really, really happy to hear what's happening, that we're making the connection, and Africans are minding our own business, you know? That's very important.
I like that.
Yes, we have to mind our own business. Until we start minding our own business, our business will not be fixed.
Yes,
and it begins with I, and it begins in making the connection to Africa. You know that. As long as you're a black man, you're an African, you know?
Give thanks, my sister.
I hear the question you asked that, what defines an African? But Peter Touch don't tell me already.
Give thanks, my sister. Vidase. Now, enough has been said already. Now let it be done. All right, we'll take one more. We'll squeeze in another. Hotep?
Yes, very excellent, Sister Angela. Yeah, man, you know the Binge and Malvern, you know?
Yes.
African Liberation Day Binge.
Okay, Malvern, African Liberation Day Binge. Going on now?
Yeah.
All right, give thanks, my brother. African Liberation Day, May 25. Let us keep the liberation struggle going. A luta continua. A Victoria is certain. The struggle continues, but victory is certain. Let's see if we can squeeze in two more. 974-5079, 5051, 5043. Hotep?
Greetings, my sister.
Greetings.
Giving thanks for the blessings this morning to be on part of the journey.
Yes.
And to endorse the concept of the ants. And to remind some of our brethren not to be worried about how few may be doing the work. The fact is, the work is being done. And when we tend to look outside of that, we don't appreciate love the work that is being done.
And we stand in testimony that it is not few. It is many.
Exactly,
it is many of us.
Even when we are not visible,
and as my brother Bongo Jerry says, it is a critical mass. We're working up to it, and it is there.
And
thank you very much.
We are here, and
yes,
divine energies.
Yes.
Divine energies will forever guide us. Give thanks, my sister. I remember you in a small corner at RFM years ago, not knowing who you were, and I give thanks at this moment to have been in your presence. And I ask you, my sister, please continue.
Medasi, my sister, Medasi. Let's take one more at 3 minutes to 10 o'clock. As we, Hotep?
My beautiful queen, how are you doing?
I am doing very well. You have a minute?
There are 200 children missing in Jamaica every month, and it's not being discussed on radio.
No, my sister, you're not going to come here with that. Let me just tell you something. I have said, and I'm putting my foot down seriously on this, that in this space, I do not want anyone coming in this space telling me what I am not doing, because hang on. You cannot say that it's not being done on radio, my sister. We spent 5 months talking about the trafficking of our children, calling the Minister of Foreign Affairs, doing programs and calling to Jamaica. I spent months on this program asking if a tree falls in the desert, the forest, and no one is there to hear it. Does it make a sound? The reason for that is because we are shouting about our children. No, man, my sister. Me go say goodbye. All right, you know why I'm saying goodbye to that, sister? Is that I have to at some point put my foot down. I cannot afford to have persons coming in this space saying that radio is not doing anything. Take it into the spaces where radio is not doing anything. I think this is now a time of war, and we have to be careful how we go about it. Hotep, are you there? You're the final one, Hotep? All right. Okay. Sorry about that. But I'm sorry I'm shouting at that, sister, but I have to, because I am not going to put up with any more of persons coming into this space to say that radio is not doing what we are doing in this space. Let us talk about what we can do and how we can do. We are doing the best that we can, and we're calling upon you to assist. In terms of our children who are missing, when we pointed to trafficking in children, we were told by academia, we were told by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs that it was not trafficking. We pointed to that many moons ago. Now they are putting out research after research after research saying that our girls are being trafficked. This is what is happening now. That is fine with me. We continue to do our work, and we still ask the question: if a tree falls in the desert, in the forest, and no one is there to hear it fall, does it make a sound? All right. This is how we're leaving you on the Africa Forum for this morning. Talia, who I normally relieve in the mornings, is now relieving me in for the big A. See you next week. Walk good. Thanks very much to my producer, Joy Morgan. Thank you very much to my co-host, Prime Eye, all the way from Gold FM in Ghana, and to all those who participated in the African Liberation Day program across the continent of Africa and Jamaica this morning. Thank you very much for your tweets, for your Facebook messages. See you next week. Walk good. Tell them other one howdy.
How good